So much to come on the show later on, but first, let's catch you up with the news with Onel Nsinsi and sports headlines with Musibudi Makura. The news is next.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter, and a very good morning to our listeners. The UN Human Rights Chief has accused the Ugandan authorities of using repressive tactics ahead of a presidential election in January. The 81-year-old President Yoweri Museveni is hoping to extend his 40-year rule. He is opposed by the singer-turned-politician Bobi Wine, who is popular amongst Uganda's youth. The UN says reports of arbitrary arrests and detentions, as well as enforced disappearances, torture, and other ill treatment of opposition supporters and activists have been on a steady increase over the past year. The organization has urged the government to uphold the right to freedom of expression following multiple recent cases of restriction of press freedom in the country. French arms company Thales will today apply for leave to appeal the Pietermaritzburg High Court in South Africa's dismissal of their application to be acquitted of the arms deal corruption charges against them. They are being charged together with the country's former president Jacob Zuma. The acquittal application was based on the death of two key Thales figures in the alleged bribing of Zuma, Alien Terrad and Pierre Moynot in 2022 and 2020 respectively. Both Thales and Zuma have argued that Terrad and Moynot's deaths infringe on their right to a fair trial. In his ruling in June, Judge Nkosinathi Chili said in such a high-profile case, society's interests should also be taken into account. Ghana is hosting the 23rd International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa, ICASA 2025, for the first time. The 5-day conference, which began yesterday, is organized by the Society for AIDS in Africa under the theme Africa in Action, catalyzing integrated and resilient health systems for sustainable response to end HIV, other infectious diseases and emerging threats. Country Director at Hamana People to People in South Africa, Clifford Zimondi, explains.
Across those who are working in the communities, scientists, policymakers, we are a network of 29 organizations, the bulk of which are in Southern Africa, which is the epicenter of the epidemic as such. We are here to network, find organizations that we can collaborate with, learn what are the next steps in our road to epidemic control by 2030 regarding universal health coverage, regarding the integration provision of integrated healthcare.
4 municipalities in South Africa's Mpumalanga province have registered large numbers of malaria cases. Over 619 people have been infected and at least 5 people have died between April and November this year. The Department of Health has visited some of the municipalities to raise awareness as the region marks SADC's Malaria Day yesterday. The Director of Communicable Diseases, Mandla Zwane, explains.
We are approaching festive season. We know very well that the community will be traveling to different areas, even areas that have known to have malaria. So we are also requesting that when they go there, they can get prophylaxis treatment for malaria in our local health facilities. That tablet is given to them 2 days before. They should take those treatment 2 days before they go to that area. And they also need to make sure that they drink those treatment when they are there in that particular area. And even when they come back to our areas after the visit, they need to make sure that they finish all the package that they give it.
Lastly, Somalis have reacted with outrage to Donald Trump's derogatory remarks about them and their country. In comments made during a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, Trump described Somalis as garbage, stating he did not want them in the country. Trump has stepped up attacks on people in the U.S. who come from Somalia since last week's shooting of 2 National Guard troops in Washington, which led him to promise to freeze migration from third world countries. Somalia's Prime Minister Hamza Abdi Barre struck a more diplomatic note while addressing an innovation summit in Mogadishu, noting that Trump had also insulted other nations. Now, for the news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Angola name final 28-man squad for the upcoming AFCON tournament, while South Africa chased record 359 to beat India in Raipur yesterday. Details of these and other stories at 6:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Connected with us, whether it's via www.channelafrica.co.za or at Channel Africa 1 on YouTube or via the SABC Plus app. We welcome you and say good morning to you once again. We'll be looking in the show, or this particular hour, about concerns when it comes to irregularities, political interference and security pressures when it comes to elections in the Central African Republic. Of course, those Central African Republic elections will be taking place on the 28th of this month. That's December of 2025.
And to still this hour coming up, we go to Kenya and find out what accountants are going to be talking about. They have a Certified Accountants Congress currently underway. Where does AI and technology fit in? Stay with us. By the way, I'm Peter Ndoro. A very good morning to you.
The Upside, taking the African perspective to fresh levels.
From Channel Africa. About to have ourselves a good time right now. Come on, brother. It's a whole thing.
You've partnered up with Focalistic, based on a true story.
You know, it's actually crazy for you to put it like that, partnered up. You know, this is someone I look up to from a very long time. 3 years ago, we put out a single, Pele Pele.
Yeah.
You know, that was my first record with him. This project, based on a true story, the album was so highly anticipated and premeditated on our end, you know, because it's something we constantly, you know, kept on going back and forth about, but we never actioned it. It's actually quite crazy because all of this is happening whilst we are both working on our albums. You know, I'm working on my album 31314 because there's a record, 31314, the interlude. So it's like a prelude to the album, you know.
Let me pronounce it properly. Is it 31314? 31314. Oh, 31314.
The Upside, live and real. It's dynamic. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
On Rise and Shine, after the 6 a.m. news, we bring you a feature that we call the Africa Roundup. This is where we have a list of news that need to be in the forefront in terms of what you need to know that you may have missed happening in and around our continent. It's a list compiled by our team of researchers, our reporters and editors, and it also serves as what one can expect to develop in this new news day. And today we start with the U.S., where the President of the United States, President Donald Trump, will host the leaders of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo today to sign a peace agreement, the White House has said, amid accusations of ceasefire violations and talks of lucrative mining deals. Here's more from David Doyle.
On Thursday, Presidents Felix Tshisekedi and Paul Kagame are expected to ratify a US-brokered peace deal that was signed by foreign ministers in June. Terms of the deal include the withdrawal of Rwandan troops and the formation of a joint security mechanism. Kinshasa and Kigali would launch an economic framework, the deal said, which they then agreed in November. Last month, the top US envoy to the region acknowledged that progress in implementing some measures on the ground had been slow. And on Tuesday, Congo and the M23 accused each other of ceasefire violations. Congo's army said the M23 had attacked its troops in multiple locations. That, an army spokesperson said, clearly showed an intention to sabotage peace agreements. The leader of a rebel alliance that includes M23 said it was Congolese forces that launched attacks, adding that the alliance had no choice but to defend itself.
The Trump administration has paused all immigration applications, including green cards and U.S. citizenship processing, filed by immigrants from 19 non-European countries, citing concerns over national security and public safety. Let's hear more from Diane To.
Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country.
U.S. President Donald Trump launched a tirade against Somali immigrants on Tuesday as the White House hit pause on all immigration applications for people from Somalia and 18 other non-European countries, citing national security and public safety concerns. The official memorandum outlining the new policy points to recent crimes suspected to be committed by immigrants, including the deadly attack on U.S. National Guard members in Washington last week. An Afghan man was arrested as a suspect, and Afghanistan is also on the list. The new policy places a hold on pending applications, including green card and U.S. citizenship processing. It also orders all immigrants from the list of countries to be re-reviewed, which involves, quote, a potential interview and, if necessary, a re-interview to fully assess all national security and public safety threats.
Alarm has spread across Guinea-Bissau after the Electoral Commission said it cannot complete the November 23rd presidential election. Armed men reportedly seized ballots and vote tallies and destroyed servers holding the results. Servers. Opposition leaders and civil society groups condemn the attack, calling for urgent action to protect the vote and restore confidence in the process. Olivia Zolino reports that authorities now face growing pressure to investigate the violence and secure the election.
A senior official for Guinea-Bissau's Electoral Commission on Tuesday said they were unable to complete the presidential election process after armed men seized ballots and vote tallies from their offices. Idrissa Jallo said the commission did not have the material or logistical conditions to continue.
The National Electoral Commission's IT services were vandalized, and the server containing the national aggregation software disappeared.
Army officers in the West African country seized power on November 26th, a day before the Electoral Commission was due to announce the results of the contested election. The Electoral Commission offices and other buildings came under attack when the army officers took power.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says that South Africa and Mozambique are entering a new era of deeper cooperation, shared prosperity and renewed solidarity. And this follows the successful conclusion of the fourth session of the South Africa-Mozambique Binational Commission in Maputo.
Today, Mozambique is South Africa's largest trading partner on the African continent and is the fourth in the whole world. We are committed to growing this partnership in a mutually beneficial manner. Many South African companies have invested here in Mozambique. There is a huge potential for further cooperation in agriculture, in agro-processing and mining. I believe that our ministers have held very fruitful discussions on the necessary steps that we need to take collectively to further deepen our relationship.
And that's how we wrap up this Thursday, the 4th of December's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll do this again tomorrow after the 6 a.m. news. Coming up, we delve deeper into the Central African region of our continent, looking at some stories making headlines there. We'll be joined in conversation with geopolitical analyst Aaron Ngambi. He'll be in that conversation with our colleague Peter.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
French arms company Thales and South Africa's former president Jacob Zuma will tomorrow apply for leave to appeal the Pietermaritzburg High Court's dismissal of their application to be acquitted of all charges in the arms deal corruption case. 20 years after Zuma was first charged in 2005, evidence is yet to be led in the case. In 2020 and 2022, two senior Thales employees who figure prominently in the charges have passed away, prompting the application that Tails and Zuma's right to a fair trial is infringed. The state has filed an application for a court order. The trial must proceed despite any further applications and appeals. Dries Liebenberg reports.
Talis has argued that the evidence of Pierre Moyneux and Alain Tetard, its directors in South Africa in the 90s and early 2000s, is crucial to answer the charges that former President Jacob Zuma was offered a 500,000 rand a year bribe. This was allegedly to ensure that he protects Talis in the investigation into irregularities around the 1999 arms deal. However, Judge Nkosinathi Cili ruled in June that the court doesn't have the power to stop a prosecution. That power lies with the National Prosecuting Authority. Judge Cili pointed out that society's interest in such a high-profile case should also be taken into account. He further said it's speculative at this stage to say that other witnesses, like for example Zuma's former financial advisor Shabir Sheikh, cannot assist the defense in their case. Meanwhile, the state has lodged an application for Judge Cili to order that the trial proceeds, despite any further appeals or applications by the defense. Lead prosecutor, Advocate Billy Downer, says in court papers that the prosecution of the case has been delayed for more than 18 years by legal challenges. Advocate Downer says during that period, Zuma made 2 presentations to the National Director of Public Prosecutions, entered a special plea, and lodged 7 pre-trial proceedings, all of which were unsuccessful. Advocate Downer says in papers Zuma's arguments have been dismissed in the initial applications, but he then pursued it on appeal as far as he possibly could. Once these appeals are exhausted, another point is raised and the exercise is repeated, according to Advocate Downer. Judge Cili has set aside 2 days for arguments. I am Dries Liebenberg in Durban.
6:17 is your time. You're still listening to Channel Africa Radio, and coming up shortly, we're chatting to Aaron Ngambi about what's happening in Central Africa.
Africa at Play with Neto and ETO Germany.
I've witnessed something fresh, something exciting, and something very inspirational from the president of the country, William Ruto. Whenever athletes are performing to their best level, he always comes on board to reward those athletes, be it football, be it athletics, and not leaving it up to the sport ministry.
The president realizes that sports is a business, and for that reason, he also reduces the number of people who are jobless, because sports now is such a serious business, and for that reason, commercialization of sport is a major way of improving or increasing employment opportunities for the young people, and that is why the president has been very persistent in trying as much as possible to inspire more sports personalities to reduce the baggage of the people who are struggling to get job opportunities in the country among the young people.
Francis F.M. Motegi, our correspondent from East Africa in Nairobi, Kenya.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live 5 days a week.
We turn our attention now to developments across Central Africa, where political transitions, humanitarian crises and shifting regional alliances continue to shape the outlook for millions there. The Central African Republic is preparing for a crucial election later this month, and growing concern about insecurity and the shrinking space for opposition. At the same time, conflict in Sudan is pushing away new waves of displaced families into neighboring Chad, a country already struggling with its own economic and humanitarian pressures. And across the wider region, issues from the political detentions in Cameroon to new energy projects in Angola and diplomatic maneuvering around the DRC-Rwanda peace process, all making headlines in the region. And to help us make sense of these stories, we're now joined by geopolitical analyst Aaron Ngambi. Aaron, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Peter, and good morning to our listeners this morning.
So let's start in the Central African Republic. How significant is this month's election, and what are the main concerns being raised about the credibility of the process there?
Well, this election is very significant because it is the first election that takes place after a constitutional referendum. So there was a referendum that took place in 2023, and basically this referendum was um, championed by the incumbent, by the government, and it basically was to remove term limits for the president, which was successful. And so you're going into an election now with the current president, President Todera, being virtually is going to be vice president. There is no term limits that is imposed on the presidency now, but also this is a crucial election because we have this election as the first one for municipality or local government elections. So there's a lot going on. There are some concerns around this election. First of all, there's a lot of suppression when it comes to the opposition, when it comes to those who seem to be viable candidates that might challenge the president. Two of them were, in fact, disqualified until November 14th, when the Constitutional Court actually reinstated and approved their candidacy. So there's a lot of maneuvering that is going on the part of the government to create an unfair advantage for the incumbent.
Is he reading the room? If we look across the continent and the region, this kind of trying to extend your stay is meeting with a lot of pushback, sometimes even with coups.
Absolutely. We've seen that in some parts of Africa, especially West Africa. The coups, military coups, are becoming quite a thing of our time. But I don't think that it matters to some of these so-called leaders and presidents of Africa if they're reading the room correctly or not. I think what matters to them is to make sure that they get what they want and do it by any means necessary. So I don't think that he's reading the room correctly, but I think that he is up to no good and is ill-bent to make sure that he gets his way.
Turning to Sudan's conflict spilling over into Chad, what's driving the latest wave of Sudanese families fleeing into an already overstretched country?
We've seen that at least 4.3 million people have actually moved from Sudan into Chad, and there's been at least 12 million people who have been displaced either internally or externally from Sudan. The ongoing conflict and the war that's been raging has no signs of slowing down or coming to an end anytime soon. Therefore, the situation for the people in Sudan still remains dire. It is a situation that is unfortunate. And in fact, people are not just fleeing war. They're hoping that if they cross the border, go to another country, they'll be able to find food. So hunger is another factor, is another element that is fueling this displacement.
Is Chad able to take in all these refugees? I mean, it's dealing with its own issues, poverty, limited humanitarian capacity, and political tensions. I guess this creates internal pressure.
Absolutely, especially if you look at the figures and the numbers of people that are flocking to Chad. In fact, about 57% of those people who've come from from Sudan into Chad young people, school-going kids. And so there are no schools, that there is no way that you could accommodate them, not only to feed them, but Chad cannot afford to give them the basic necessities of life, education, clean water, and so on and so forth. Therefore, the United Nations mission in Chad to help these refugees has been working under very difficult circumstances.
How do you think the expanding Sudan conflict is actually affecting stability across the wider Central Africa region, as well as perhaps the Sahel?
Well, the Sudan is very vital to Africa, not only geographically, but also when you look at mineral wealth, when you look at its rich history. And so if you see the conflict that's been going on for over 2 years now in Sudan, Unfortunately, it has attracted very little attention from the African leaders. I was very disappointed myself to see 7 heads of states and 7 presidents leave Africa to go to the Ukraine, to go to Russia and try to talk about the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. Yet the Sudan is burning. So the problem is that if we fail to deal with this at home, you see the influx of refugees going in other countries. You see a lot of poverty. You see a lot of issues, even diseases that will actually move along with the population that is leaving the country of Sudan. So this country's conflict is very strategic. It needs to be given all the attention it needs. It needs to be able to be addressed without fail, and it needs a serious diplomatic settlement and a political settlement. Otherwise, the war is not good for the region, it's not good for Central Africa, but it's not also good for the entire continent.
Let's talk a little bit about Cameroon, the death of opposition figure Ekane in detention. That's raised questions about political freedoms. What do we know about this case and its implications?
Ekane was one of the political figures that was arrested after the sham elections in Cameroon. If you recall, Cameroon just came out of an election recently, and about 48 people were killed during the protest because people rose to the streets. They didn't want this despot, who's 92 years old, to continue being president of Cameroon after sham election. So after those people were killed, the political leaders, some of the political leaders encouraged people to voice out, and Kanye was one of those people. And for doing that, he was arrested and charged with inciting violence, creating instability in the country, and so forth and so on. And so since his arrest, his health was deteriorating. In fact, I think that when his lawyers saw him about 2 days ago, he was not even able to speak. But yet the regime did not provide basic medical facilities that he needed. They took long to evacuate him to a hospital. Even with that, they left his medical devices that he needs and depends and relies on to have good health. So most of the people look at this as nothing but political lynching by the incumbent and revenge for this political leader and others in the opposition for encouraging people to go to the streets and protest.
So the United States is preparing to host the DRC and Rwanda leaders for a peace agreement signing. How's this move being seen across Central Africa? And do you think this signing will actually even happen?
Well, from the reports we're getting, Paul Kagame has already arrived in Washington, D.C. I think that Tshisekedi has arrived or must be on his way now. And it looks like the signing of this deal will go on today on Thursday. Now, the unfortunate part is that it had to take these 2 African leaders to cross the waters and the sea to come all the way to Washington, D.C. and to try to sign a piece of paper. The question is, will this peace agreement hold? I think that is yet to be seen. Because if you recall, there's been meetings before this, meetings in Qatar, in Doha, between the 2 parties, Rwandan side and the DR Congo. And this is over the conflict in the eastern part of the DR Congo and the role that the M23 plays, which has been accused of being backed by the Rwandan Defense Force. So we've seen that these talks that have happened in the past, the ministers, foreign affairs ministers meeting and signing this framework of agreement to a ceasefire, these have been signs of progress, but yet a huge setback happened. And so we yet to see if the actual signing of the peace agreement will yield any substantive results.
All right, we'll have to wait and see for sure. Aaron, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Good to see you again, Peter. You have a wonderful day ahead of you, and happy Friday Eve.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Aaron Ngambi, a geopolitical analyst, making sense of the stories that are playing out in Central Africa at this time. And a number of big issues of concern for me. Political opposition dying in police detention. That's never a good sign. Central African Republic, we're seeing leaders there trying to extend their stay in power. And that always creates all kinds of tensions. And I think about Gen Zs and also about military coups, particularly in that region. All right, we'll get on top of those stories for you as they play out. Because right now it's 6:30 and it's time for your news headlines with Onel Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. President Donald Trump will host leaders of Rwanda and Paul Kagame and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, in Washington today to sign what is being called a historic peace and economic agreement. The UN Human Rights Chief has accused the Ugandan authorities of using repressive tactics ahead of a presidential election in January. The 81-year-old President Yoweri Museveni is hoping to extend his 40-year rule. And Ukraine says it has been told that U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff that there was a positive outcome to a meeting with President Vladimir Putin in Moscow about bringing an end to the war. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Time now to check in with what's happening in the world of sports. We say good morning to Musibudi Makura for that update.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Asanda, thank you so much. A very good morning from the sports desk. We'll start with football news. Angola head coach Patrice Bumel has named his final 28-man squad for the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations tournament, confirming the group that will now attempt to deliver the Palace Negras' best ever showing at the continental finals. Angola are in Group B against South Africa, Zimbabwe, as well as Egypt. Despite expectations, seasoned figures including Bastos, Gilberto, as well as Andrada were all not included in the final list. The French coach has opted for a balanced group that also blends experienced internationals with emerging talents, reinforcing his ambition to go beyond the quarterfinal stages for the very first time in the country's history. Angola will rely heavily on the potency of Gilson Dala, Zito Luvambo, Mbala Nzola, Mbululu and Randy Ndeka as they aim now to break down some of the tournament's strongest defences. In midfield, influential figures such as Show Freddy, Maestro as well as Benny Mugendi will anchor the team, providing stability as well as creativity in equal measure, while in defence, Bumal has selected Clinton Mata, David Carmo, Nuroyo, Fortuna, Gaspar as well as Bantu amongst others to ensure that they do not allow any goals to go through that defence. The Africa Cup of Nations tournament gets underway on the 18th of December, concluding on the 18th of January. Back home now, Abdelislam Wadu, the head coach of the South African football side Orlando Pirates, says they are fully committed to serve the national team as the Buccaneers dominate the 25-man Bafana Bafana squad that is headed to the AFCON tournament. Pirates boast the biggest representation with 9 players in coach Hugo Bruce's side that is set to jet off for Morocco later on this month. The former Morocco national team captain says they are always happy to serve the national teams at all times.
First of all, we are proud as a club and proud as a coach for my players to be such represented in the national team. I told you before in some press conference that Orlando Pirates is a club that working for the nation. We are available for the national team. We are available for the coach of the national team for the collaboration. So of course, when we see such number of players, we just want to wish them all the best.
On to some cricket news now. South Africa completed the joint highest chase in the history of one-day internationals in India, as they passed the target of 359 to win by 4 wickets in Naya Rabu yesterday. So Aiden Markram hit 110 runs from the top of the order, while Matthew Britsky as well as Devard Brevis both made half centuries as the Tourists beat India with 4 balls to spare. Virat Kohli as well as Rajakut Kakwad had centuries in the home side's innings, but having closed on 358 for the loss of 6 wickets, they were unable to defend their score as South Africa completed the joint 6th highest chase in the format's history to level the 3-match series at 1-1. The series concludes this coming Saturday before the 5-match T20 series. On to some rugby news now. 2-time defending rugby world champions South Africa are in a very favourable pool for the 2027 Rugby World Cup in Australia. Now, the Springboks are in Pool B with Italy as their main rivals, but they could potentially face New Zealand as early as the quarterfinal stages. New Zealand are in Pool A with Australia. However, former Wallabies coach Joe Schmidt cautioned against getting too predictive.
It's the 3 World Cups and just some of those permutations, you start plotting a pathway through and that pathway changes completely because somebody upsets someone. And, I remember sitting in a changing room. We'd played Canada in our first game in 2015 and watching Japan beat South Africa. And, nobody predicted that. That's one of the great things about World Cups. I think there's going to be a surprise in those pool matches somewhere. And so I don't think you can afford to get too predictive, albeit that you have a look.
And finally, Jenny van Dijk, the head coach of the South African women's national netball team, has emphasized that she considers the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations in Malawi as a highly competitive and important tournament. Now, the continent's top nations will battle for supremacy from the 8th of December right until the 14th of December. And both the South African men's team, the Pumas, and the national women's team will be aiming now to defend their titles. The two squads are set to depart on Friday to begin their campaign, and Van Dijk says retaining their crown is essential.
Hello everybody, and thank you for being here today. It's such a privilege to actually be able to go to the Africa Cup again. It's a real important competition for us as the Spark Proteas. We will be leaving on Friday morning early. The players will come into camp 4th, the day before, so we'll just sleep over and fly out the next morning. When we get that side, we will have 2 days to prepare, and then we'll start with the Africa Cup on Monday.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, remember to send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. With Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
.38 Central African time. Still so much to come on the program, and I know that Asanda, you're going to be talking to a group of accountants in a short while.
Yeah, it's day 2 of the Association of the Chartered Certified Accountants Africa Members Convention, and this is happening in Mombasa, Kenya. So we'll find out more about what's happening. It started yesterday, so today is day 2.
And a lot of people may not know that I started my life off as an accountant, as an auditor myself. And I can tell you that it's changed a lot over the years. Before, you literally had books that you wrote inside with pen as your accounts. Everything is now electronic, and a lot of it actually is self-driven, so you don't even need an accountant. Fascinating developments. I'll be interested and curious to know what comes out of this conference.
Great.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
The United States was very vocal at the beginning of South Africa's G20 presidency, and this is largely due to strained relations with South Africa at the time, that they were not really keen on participating. Where do they stand right now?
The US is planning to take over the presidency of the G20 next year, and our understanding from them is that they intend to continue to do so, and therefore it is quite difficult then to be in a situation where you are not not attending deputies' meetings or discussions during our presidency and then to take over the presidency next year. From a finance track perspective, there has been engagement. We've been working on a communique last week and this week here in Zimbabwe. What's important about that is that it's a consensus document. And so all the members in the room have to agree to the language that is used there. And our US colleagues have been part of those discussions and negotiations.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
In case you're watching the time, it's 6:40 Central African time, and it's time now to find out what's been happening in the world of business, economics, commerce, you name it. If that interests you, then stay with us, because right now, Matapelo Mahape gives us an update.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says South Africa's economy has stagnated under a burdensome regulatory regime driven by racial grievances, and that it fell firmly outside of the group of the 20 largest industrialized economies. The U.S.'s top diplomat again attacked South Africa's government in an article published on online platform subtitled "America Welcomes a New G20." He urged that the government's appetite for racism and tolerance for violence against African citizens had become embedded as core domestic policies, views that are not substantiated by facts. Sharon Bryce-Peace reported that Rubio reiterated President Donald Trump's position that South Africa would not be invited to participate in the G20 under the U.S. presidency, a position that has been rejected by Pretoria as outside Washington's purview.
Rubio laid into South Africa's government as seeming intent on enriching itself while the country's economy limped along, all while South Africans, according to Rubio, were subject to violence, discrimination and land confiscation without compensation. He attacked South Africa's G20 presidency for its focus on climate change, diversity and inclusion. He said the US supported the people of South Africa, but not what he labelled its radical ANC-led government, accusing it of scapegoating its own citizens and the United States. President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier indicated that despite numerous attempts to reset the relationship, the US continued to apply punitive measures against South Africa based on misinformation and distortions.
And questions have been raised about how a competitive electricity tariff could be funded for South African chrome producers and ferrochrome smelters. This as industry players argue that the cost of power is the real cause of a sector's decline, not ore prices. In a joint statement, the Minerals Council of South Africa and the Ferroalloy Producers Association have rejected the introduction of a chrome ore export tax. Chief Operating Officer at Teresa Michelle Taylor says engagements with the government are ongoing.
And in our view, it doesn't benefit them because their issue is not chrome feedstock or the price of chrome ore or the volume of chrome ore available to them. They've got more than sufficient. What makes them not competitive is electricity tariffs. We've seen electricity tariffs increase by some 900% since 2008. So when you then go to say impose a chrome tax, you've got to say, well, all right, well, who's going to consume that chrome tax? Who's going to absorb it and who's going to pay it?
In Nigeria, Central Bank has announced sweeping changes to its cash management policies, introducing stricter withdrawal limits and scraping fees on access deposits. This is in a bid to curb cash dependency and tackle security and money laundering risks. The Central Bank says the changes are effective from the 1st of January next year, and individuals will be limited to cumulative weekly withdrawals of almost $346 and corporate almost $3,458. Withdrawals above these thresholds will attract fees of 3% for individuals and 5% for corporate. This move marks the latest step in Nigeria's push towards a cashless economy. And Ghana's consumer inflation has slowed for the 11th consecutive month, following a 6.3% year-on-year in November from 8% in October. Government statistician Al-Hassan Idrisu says that the drop was mostly driven by a slowdown in food inflation, and the domestic price condition and external market conditions were both stabilizing. Idrisu says inflation is now at its lowest since a rebasing exercise in 2021. The West African gold, oil and cocoa producing nation is emerging from its most severe economic crisis in decades. And Norway's governing Labour Party says it has reached agreements with the four left-wing parties in Parliament on a 2026 fiscal budget. This ends a standoff that had threatened to bring down Prime Minister Johan Gahr Store's cabinet. This deal, which excludes demands for a gradual phase-out of oil and divestment in Israeli companies, came ahead of a vote on the budget due tomorrow, which is Friday. If the government had lost that vote, it would have forced the Prime Minister to call a vote of confidence. Labour narrowly won a second term in September election, but that result has left it reliant on four left-wing parties to pass the budget. And a look at your financial indicators this morning. One US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,446 naira. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 23. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39, and in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 94. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 34. Russia at 77 rubles 52. India, it's 89 rupees 85, while in China, it's 70 yuan 7, and in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rands 10 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. A look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,201 and platinum at $1,657 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $62.93 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapela Mahape.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Thanks to Matapelo. She'll be back in the next hour with more business news for you. Right now, though, let's go to South Africa with the Department of Basic Education there, in partnership with the Education Outcomes Fund and a coalition of South African and international donors, implementing partners, launched a $29 million early childhood care education outcomes fund this Monday. The fund is expected to transform early learning for more than 100,000 children in one of South Africa's provinces, in some of South Africa's provinces, where access to quality early learning remains among the lowest. Sisi Sekhalo has more on the story.
The fund is set to support the Department of Basic Education's 2030 Early Childhood Development Strategy and Banapeli Blueprint, which aims to expand access, improve quality and child development outcomes for underserved children. South Africa's Minister of Basic Education, Siviwe Gwarube, says investing in early childhood education has proved to improve the education system in many countries. She adds that the benefits include more children completing school and more children taking up the science, technology, engineering and math subjects. She elaborates on why the funding is important.
The most exciting thing about this fund is the South African government has been able to put up 100 million over 3 years, which amounted to about 300 million. And of course, we had our global philanthropic and NGO partners match that funding and say, look, you've clearly demonstrated that you are serious about this investment, and so we will come to the party and invest with you. But the other unique feature about this fund is that it's not just another fund. It's an outcomes-based financing model, a form of a blended financing that says we have established what does success look like. So we want to be able to target children from 3 to 5 across the country, particularly those in underserved communities. We want to have 1.1 million new centers built in the next 3 years. We want to make sure that 115,000 learners are getting into the system.
Women in remote, rural and disadvantaged communities who run early childhood development centers will be given a priority. Kwahube again.
We want to, one, improve existing early learning programs. Number two, we want to build new ones to be able to give greater access. So I think actually the women who are running early child development centers are going to be they're going to benefit the most. One, because they're going to benefit from further training and upskilling of these skills. Number two, also they will be able to offer something that gives them a competitive advantage in the community. Where do parents want to take their children? They want to take their children to a place where it is safe, structurally sound, where they have access to school nutrition, when they can play and learn. And so therefore, this will be really beneficial to our ECD practitioners who really are the backbone of the sector.
Meanwhile, the Chief Programs Officer at Education Outcomes Fund, Milena Castelnau, has expressed that this particular funding is different and will be focused on the outcomes delivered by the implementing partners.
It's going to be implemented through 5 implementing partners. So their names are Smart Start, Early Learning Resource Unit, Ntataize, Impande, and the Unlimited Child. And the innovation in this fund comes from the fact that we're using an outcomes-based financing mechanism. So we only disburse the funding to the implementing partners when the results have been achieved. So that means when the quality has improved in the centers and when the children we've been demonstrating that the children are developmentally on track.
The department and its partners have sought to recruit the best partners to implement the fund. One of the implementers is an organization known as the Unlimited Child. The organization prides itself for having ensured that 2.5 million children in the country go into the classroom being ready for school. They are also the fastest growing organization in Africa and exist in 5 countries in the continent. The Chief Executive Officer of the organization, Ken Spotcheta, elaborates on the work that they will be doing.
We are an implementing partner for existing ECD centers or early learning programs, ELPs. We'll be working in KZN with 224 ECD centers or early learning programs, and we want to make sure that the children in these programs go to school being ready and that they have a very high quality program. We actually will be taking early learning programs that already exist in communities. They just don't have a high quality program. So we know in South Africa we have a whole lot of child minding facilities. So these are women that look after children, but they don't have an educational program. So we are looking for these ELPs that exist, and we will be making sure that we train the ECD practitioner to run a well-functioning ECD center, that the children in her care have all of the toys and equipment that they need, and that the program that they have works and is a program that is curriculum linked in South Africa.
Meanwhile, the department has expressed that the funding model provides early childhood development practitioners with training, mentorship, and pathways to formal DBE registration that unlock government subsidies. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Fascinating story indeed. And what we know is that if children are deprived opportunities for early childhood education, they often struggle with things like lower school readiness, weaker learning foundations, and the higher likelihood of repeating grades or even dropping out, including reduced educational attainment. And that's why it's so critically important.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Moranziwa means my love in Xitsonga. So if you're listening to this, just know that you are my love. Yes. You and I are an item. We're dating. We are together. So I love you, baby. Why are you blushing? Why are you blushing? Like, haven't you heard somebody confessing their love to you? I mean, you gotta get used to it now, because I'm gonna tell you this every day, that I love you. I can tell you, there are so many people who are never told they are loved. I come to the studio every Monday, 12 to 3, because I've got an appointment with you. I take you serious. Forget about the other person, right? Moranziwa.
The Midnight Snack, every Monday, 12 to 3 a.m. with Chanduko Ligege. Be inspired. Stay informed. Channel Africa, the beauty of life. Now available anytime, anywhere with our new app.
Right, let's talk the ACCA's convention now. It's day 2 of this Association of Chartered Certified Accountants Africa Members Convention, and in Mombasa it is in the next few hours. It will be day 2. Delegates are expected to build on yesterday's discussions, which focused on technology, professional visibility and the evolving role of accountants across the continent. For a look back at day 1 and what's ahead today, we're joined now by George Njiari, who is ACCA's head of the Eastern Africa cluster. George, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Thank you very much for having me.
It's our pleasure. So what is the Africa Members Convention and why is it significant for the profession of accountancy?
Thank you very much for that question. The Africa Members Convention brings together accountants and finance professions across the region, the whole of Africa. And the purpose is to engage in high-level discussions on the evolving landscape of the global profession and Africa's position within it. We aim to develop recommendations to inform policy. Now, this is not the first AMC we are holding. Actually, this is the 5th AMC we are holding. We hold it every 2 years. Last African Members Convention was actually held in South Africa. And just to demonstrate that it is not just a talk conference, we actually developed some policy recommendations which are actually being implemented. We focused last time on how we focus on rolling out sustainability. And as a result of that, we came with some key recommendations which we're implementing across Africa. The African Members Convention attracts quite a number of members. This year, we've attracted close to 700 members across the region, and they are coming from different sectors.
So yesterday we understand that technology and leadership featured quite intensely there, strongly. We imagine things have vastly changed within the profession. If we look back to, say, the past 10 years, for example, why are these areas becoming so critical for accountants in Africa, particularly technological advancements?
Absolutely. And I think you agree with me that technology changes, evolutions in technology are reality. And in 2020, with COVID, this space accelerated. Accountants, just like all of us, like anybody else, live in this world whereby technology, and for us, when we talk about technology, we are thinking about artificial intelligence, robotics, big data, is a reality for accountants. And for us, we view technologies as an enabler for professional accountants. What this means is that technology provides an accountant with an opportunity to automate and also de-skill what you call time-consuming and repetitive tasks. So accountants in the past were more or less viewed as being counters. But some of these things which are repetitive, which can be automated, actually can be done by technology. What this means is that our accountants are then left to focus on more high-value things. For example, to focus on their role as advisors for businesses, for enterprises. And this is what you're looking at. Over time, the role of the accountant is moving more and more towards a person who is more strategic, towards a person who's forward-looking. Perhaps to be a little bit more graphical, before accountants were seen as people who would provide the information and data that then will be needed by decision makers in the boardroom to be able to make decisions. But now you're saying accountants are now part of those decision makers. Accountants are not just there to provide the information, they are there to be able to show trends. They are there because they understand the bottom line. And also to connect to the question you've asked about leadership. I think with the changing nature of technology, with the changes in the world, it means that accountants now are moving more and more towards leadership. They understand the bottom line of companies. And with the changes in the skills that we want from accountants, because you're saying accountants, in addition to understanding the finances, need to have better emotional intelligence, need to be better communicators, need to be better business partners. It means that in the boardroom, they are no longer just providing information. They are actually part of the decision makers. And what's a reality and what you're witnessing right now is that actually a number of businesses, an increasing number of businesses, are having their CFOs, CEOs actually being accountants.
Right, day 2 unfolds. What can be expected to come out of this day for our listeners and delegates?
Absolutely. I think today we'll focus a lot on the issue of sustainability. As you know, sustainability is the talk. So there'll be a lot of focus on sustainability and what it means for businesses, what it means for professional accountants, what is the role of accountants when it comes to sustainability. Of course, a number of countries are rolling out what you call the sustainability roadmap, so that accountants now are reporting on how they are implementing, embedding sustainability in their reporting. So this will be the main focus on this. What does sustainability mean? What is the role that accountants will be playing in this?
George,
there'll also be a bit of a focus on trade. Sorry, I didn't get you.
Yeah, I think we can leave it on that point. So the other focus will be
Sure.
on trade as secondary to the main one.
Yes, correct, yes.
Thank you. We are completely out of time. I wish we could continue with this conversation, but
Thank you very much.
we nonetheless thank you for your time. I think we've got some valuable insights.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Okay, bye.
That's George Njari, ACCA's head of the Eastern Africa cluster.
It's a little bit before 7 o'clock. Coming up on the other side, so much to look forward to as you listen to Channel Africa's Rise and Shine. It's time for the news. Here's Onelen Sinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter. The U.S. President Donald Trump will host leaders of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, in Washington today. This is said to sign what is being called a historic peace and economic agreement. Meanwhile, ahead of the meeting, clashes between the M23 rebel group and Congolese government forces, supported by coalition troops, broke out across South Kivu province, escalating tension in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Independent social and political analyst Boikanyo Nkwatle explains.
This is not the first time that such a meeting has taken place. Perhaps this will be the second meeting. If you are not going to bring all stakeholders on board, it defeats the whole purpose of the whole facilitation talk. Because one of the bone of contention, I think, raised within the M23 is the fact that they've been excluded, they've been isolated from all these talks, and the DRC government itself has not honored some of the agreements that they had in terms of integrating some of their members into formal structures of the military. If you have not all the role players who are part and parcel of this whole conflict, and you only take a segment of them, I don't think it will have an impact.
The UN Human Rights Chief has accused the Ugandan authorities of using repressive tactics ahead of a presidential election in January. The 81-year-old President Yoweri Museveni is hoping to extend his 40-year rule. He is opposed by singer-turned-politician Bobi Wine, who is popular amongst Uganda's youth. The UN says reports of arbitrary arrests and detentions, as well as enforced disappearances, torture and other ill treatment of opposition supporters and activists have been on a steady increase over the past year. The organization has urged the government to uphold the right to freedom of expression following multiple recent cases of restriction of press freedom in the country. French arms company Thales will today apply for leave to appeal the Pietermaritzburg High Court in South Africa's dismissal of the application to be acquitted of the arms deal corruption charges against them. They are being charged together with the country's former president Jacob Zuma. The acquittal application was based on the death of two key Thales figures in the alleged bribing of Zuma in 2022 and 2020, respectively. Both Thales and Zuma have argued that the two people's deaths infringed on their rights to a fair trial. In his ruling in June, Judge Nkosinathi Chili said in such a high-profile case, society's interest should also be taken into account. 4 municipalities in South Africa's Mpumalanga province have registered large numbers of malaria cases. Over 619 people have been infected and at least 5 people have died between April and November this year. The Department of Health has visited some of the municipalities to raise awareness about malaria. The Director for Communicable Diseases, Mandla Zwane, explains.
We are approaching festive season. We know very well that the community will be traveling to different areas, even areas that have known to have malaria. So we are also requesting that when they go there, they can get prophylaxis treatment for malaria in our local health facilities. That tablet is given to them 2 days before. They should take those treatment 2 days before they go to that area. And they also need to make sure that they drink those treatment when they are there in that particular area. And even when they come back to our areas after the visit, they need to make sure that they finish all the package that they give it.
Lastly, Ukraine says it has been told by the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff that there was a positive outcome to a meeting with President Vladimir Putin in Moscow about bringing an end to the war. The country's Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha says Kyiv has been invited to continue talks in the United States in the near future. At a meeting of NATO foreign ministers in Brussels, the Secretary General Mark Rutte urged members to not waver in their support to Ukraine.
Every single day, Russian missiles and drones cause death and destruction, leaving civilians without heat, light and water as winter approaches. Ukraine's security is closely linked to our own. Our support must continue unabated to help Ukraine defend itself today and deter tomorrow.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Oneli Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, FIFA gives clubs an extra week before releasing AFCON players, while South Africa chased record 359 to beat India in the second one-day international. Details at 7:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
5 minutes past 7 Central African time. Coming up this hour, we take a look at a concerning report by Amnesty International about Sudan's rapid support forces carrying out war crimes during their assault of Zamzam. We speak to a researcher from Amnesty International.
So he's Peter Ndoro, I'm Asanda Beda. We are Channel Africa. The show is Rise and Shine. Connect with us at Channel Africa 1. That's our handle across our various social media platforms. We're also live streaming on YouTube. Another story we look at in this hour is Kenya's parliamentary inquiry into the British Army training unit in Kenya called Batuk. And this has brought renewed attention to long-standing allegations of environmental damage, misconduct and harm suffered by local communities. We speak to rights groups about that, and a Kenyan human rights lawyer will be joining us to unpack. And this particular individual has been closely involved in supporting those affected families there. Of course, those stories and more will be coming up as we are together until 9 this morning.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, as we promised a little earlier on, concerning developments in Sudan, Amnesty International has released a stark new report accusing Sudan's Rapid Support Forces of carrying out war crimes during their assault on Zamzam, and that's the largest displacement camp in Darfur. According to the organization, between the 11th and the 14th of April, the RSF and allied groups attacked civilians, burned shelters, destroyed clinics, mosques, and schools, and forced more than 400,000 people to flee. The findings suggest that violence at Zamzam is not an isolated incident, but part of a wider and continuing pattern of atrocities across Darfur as Sudan's war worsens and humanitarian access collapses. Well, to help us understand what's happened and what it means for civilians and the international community we can realistically do, we're now joined by Amnesty International researcher Nikki Frederick, who authored the report. Nikki, thanks so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and good morning.
So, Nikki, take us through what the Amnesty report documents regarding what happened at the Zamzam camp during the April attacks.
So, our research found that on the morning of the 11th of April, residents woke up to heavy shelling and random gunfire when the RSF attacked Zamzam camp. In their attack, they deployed explosive weapons. They were randomly shooting their firearms in densely populated residential areas. And as you mentioned, the attack lasted for 3 days. Eyewitnesses told us that they saw RSF fighters shoot and kill 47 civilians who were hiding in homes. They were fleeing the violence at a clinic. And these were just the amount of deaths that the people that we spoke to had seen, but the civilian harm is incredibly high. The death rate estimates from 220 to as high as 1,500. Eyewitnesses told us that they saw RSF fighters burn the markets, burn shops, burn businesses, really leaving Zamzam uninhabitable for anybody to return, really. And the people that were able to escape just described absolute harrowing displacement journeys characterized by lack of food, lack of water, lack of medicine. They saw their loved ones die from their injuries sustained during the attack along the way. They saw they said they saw many people die of thirst just because of the lack of water in these areas. And then once they reached places of relative safely, they were explaining how they were living under trees, just in absolute dismal conditions without any real access to humanitarian services.
And from your observations, these are war crimes that you're witnessing or are finding out. And are civilians being primarily targeted, not combatants?
We indeed say that these violations must be investigated as war crimes. And whilst there were presence of military forces in Zamzam, the incidents that we documented targeted civilians. And from the testimonies as well as from verified video evidence, it's clear that the RSF fighters were attacking anybody that they perceived to have been associated with the joint forces that have been fighting alongside the Sudanese armed forces.
You described the Zamzam You described the Zamzam assault as part of a sustained pattern. Tell us a little bit more about the wider trends of violence that are emerging across Darfur.
So we had seen the RSF's campaign in Darfur to capture Darfur really started in May 2024, and as part of this campaign, they laid a siege on the capital of North Darfur, El Fasher, for approximately 18 months. And to gain their territory and hold ground, they attacked villages, they attacked IDP camps, and the attack on Zamzam that took place in April of this year is really very emblematic of those attacks that happened on many other IDP camps and and villages in North Darfur. And in October, RSF claimed control over Al Fashir, also with incredibly horrific reports coming from executions, more deliberate killings of civilians, as well as women and girls that have been subjected to sexual violence.
RSF, of course, claiming that they didn't target civilians and that armed groups actually are operating inside the camp. How do these claims by RSF compare with what your research has uncovered?
We did document the military presence of factions of the joint forces as well as self-defense groups. However, the camp hosted hundreds of thousands of civilians living in highly densely populated areas, and the camp consisted of civilian objects, including medical facilities that were delivering humanitarian services, and these are protected. So whilst the forces and the military equipment belonging to the joint forces factions can be legitimate military targets, just the mere presence of those joint forces neither makes Zamzam camp a legitimate military target as a whole, and nor does it alleviate the rapid support forces from its responsibility to abide by international humanitarian law, including the principle of distinction.
A concern has been raised about RSF getting support, external support from places like the United Arab Emirates. Your research, has that backed that claim up? What do we know?
We have indeed documented in past reports that the UAE supports the RSF with weapons. We have found both weapon systems from China as well as France that have been redirected through the UAE to the RSF. So we are calling on countries, and in the first place, the United Arab Emirates, to refrain from transferring any weapons or any ammunition to the RSF, as well as other actors in the conflict, because we did find that the United Arab Emirates has actively fueled the armed conflict by supporting the RSF with weapons.
Nikki, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thank you for this report.
Thank you.
That was Nikki Friedrich, who's Amnesty International researcher and author of the report titled "A Refugee Destroyed" on the Zamzam camp attacks in Darfur, and it paints a pretty grim picture. Certainly we need to keep shining the light on these atrocities that have been taking place in this part of the world.
16 minutes past 7 Central African time it is. Let's head over to the U.S. now, where Minnesota officials have reacted strongly after President Donald Trump launched a harsh attack on Somali immigrants, calling them garbage and accusing them of ripping off the state. The remarks come amid reports of possible federal immigration raids targeting Somali communities in the Twin Cities. Local leaders say they haven't been notified, but they're preparing for the worst. Wutlale Pele has more.
The controversy began in Washington, where President Trump used a cabinet meeting to launch one of his most direct attacks yet on Somali immigrants and on Minnesota officials who support them.
Somalians ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. The welfare is like 88%. They contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay?
Trump went further, calling Somali immigrants garbage and accusing Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and her supporters of harming the country. He also said he wants to pause migration from what he called third world countries, a category he noted excludes white Afrikaners. The comments come as Minnesota officials say they've received credible media reports suggesting that up to 100 federal immigration agents may be deployed to target Somali communities in Minneapolis and St. Paul. But local leaders say they haven't been formally informed and they will not cooperate.
To our Somali community, we love you and we stand with you. That commitment is rock solid. Minneapolis is proud to be home to the largest Somali community in the entire country.
Mayor Lawyer Jacob Frey says any raid aimed at Somalis risks detaining a community of majorly documented U.S. citizens based purely on appearance.
Targeting Somali people means that due process will be violated, mistakes will be made. And let's be clear, it means that American citizens will be detained for no other reason than the fact that they look like they are Somali. That is not now and will never be a legitimate reason.
Across the river in St. Paul, Mayor Melvin Carter condemned the president's language as racist and dangerous.
When we talk about attacks, racist, Islamophobic, xenophobic attacks on our Somali community, and you combine that with what Mayor Fry just said, the vast majority of our Somali community are citizens. So who he just attacked isn't just Somalis. Who he attacked is Somali Americans. Who he attacked is Americans. And so if the President of the United States is telling you out loud that he hates Americans, then I can't imagine a greater confession of incompetence to do the job that you've been hired to do.
The Twin Cities is home to roughly 80,000 Somali residents. Many have lived in the U.S. for decades, and most are documented or citizens. But after the president's remarks, community leaders say fear is rising.
I'm proud to say I'm a Somali American. This country welcomed me and my family 26 years ago. It has provided me a life that I did not have in Somalia. We came here and we are thankful to be here. I've been educated here, got the opportunity to serve my community, to be a council member. I know many families are fearful tonight. They are.
Police say they've received no official confirmation of upcoming raids, urging calm while asking any protests to remain peaceful. As tensions rise, Minnesota leaders say their message is clear. Somali Americans are part of We the People, and they're not going anywhere. I'm Buthali Pile, SABC News.
Get in touch with us at Channel Africa 1. That's our handle. We are on X, on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, as well as Facebook. We'd love to hear your views about Channel Africa.
The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
There's a Ugandan lawmaker. Is Atkins Katusabe, who speaks with an American accent in Parliament. So the parliamentarians have complained that we don't understand what you are saying.
Listen to him.
Come on.
Mr. Speaker, I think this is a disaster that could cause an extinction of our entire community. Going to procedure.
Mr. Speaker, the English that is trying to put this matter here is confusing a number of us and making us miss very serious issue. He needs to speak the common English of Uganda. The English is too much.
Need a piece of paper so that we'll be able to read. The English is too much. I picture him saying order, out of order.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time. Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and Shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Kenya's parliamentary inquiry into the British Army training unit in Kenya, Batuk, has brought renewed attention to long-standing allegations of environmental damage, misconduct and harm suffered by local communities. Rights groups say the hearings could be a turning point in holding foreign military actors accountable on Kenyan soil. To help us unpack the latest developments and what this inquiry could mean going forward, we're joined now from Kenya by human rights lawyer Kelvin Kubai, who has been closely involved in supporting affected families. Kelvin, good morning and thank you for making time for us.
Good morning, too. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here. There has been the report by the Parliamentary Committee on Defense, Foreign Affairs and Intelligence, which has been ongoing for the last 2 years. We've participated in the submissions of memoranda ranging from environmental degradation to abandoned women and children fathered by the foreign soldiers and to other standalone cases, some involving injuries and others on work benefit and labor issues.
So, I guess that answers in terms of what inspired the inquiry to be launched this time around. But what are the local communities, because you've worked with them closely, what are they hoping to achieve with this and what will finally be resolved and addressed?
There has been accumulated grievances that have gone unanswered, and there has been unavailable channels for redress through which victims of the actions of the British Army have been unable to use so that they can access justice. So one of the long-standing issues that the local communities hope for is that they will be able to get justice for these accumulated grievances that have been unresolved over time. And more so, there will be a change in policy that will now henceforth make the training to be more sustainable. A training that is sensitive not just to the environment, but to the inherent human right of the local civilian population, especially where the actions of the British Army contravene the right of the local populace.
And one of those big concerns raised is the issue of environmental harm and unexploded ordnance. From your perspective, how widespread or is this problem, and how big is the problem, and how has it impacted the people on their ground in their daily living?
I think from the findings of the report and from my work into these activities, in 2021, we did file an environmental petition at the Environment and Land Court of Kenya, alleging, based on it's actually not an allegation, but based on a fire that was caused by the British Army in the course of training that ended up ravaging over 12,000 acres of forested land within the Loldaiga Conservancy where the army was training. And there has been other issues where the British military has been using white phosphorus on undisclosed coordinates in the far north where they conduct much of their live training. So these issues have had gross impact, not just to the human lives, but also the animals and plants that co-share this ecosystem. And it appears the British Army has not put into consideration the environmental social impact assessment going into its training. Our local institutions that are supposed to manage the environment on the behalf of the people. In this instance, we have a Kenyan institution known as NEMA, National Environment and Management Authority, which is supposed to oversee all environmental use, including the activities of the British Army and how they impact the environment. It has been able to manage or oversee this training. So going henceforth, it is our hope that the training will be more sustainable. NEMA will have a position in being able to oversee and manage the use of the environment by the British Army and other actions. When we have a military training being conducted in a conservancy, it really defeats the intent and purposes of a conservancy, because a conservancy is supposed to be a safe haven for wild animals. So we cannot double up. An ecosystem or a conservancy should not double up as a training facility. It can only either be a conservancy or be clearly demarcated and gazetted as a training area. But we cannot have conflicting uses of a sensitive ecosystem to the detriment and harm of the local communities and the ecosystem at large.
And over and above conservation issues and environmental issues, we've also heard testimonies about alleged misconduct of the actual Batuk personnel or the soldiers involved. Are there particular cases or patterns that stand out for you there?
Yeah. Recently, we've documented a number of cases, especially the case of Agnes Wanjiru, which have also been brought into my attention. And we've also been helping women who've fathered children with the British soldiers who've chosen to evade all responsibility and have been able to, go silent or abandon these children. And we've been documenting their cases as well and trying to follow up even in UK court through DNA to see how best we can, through the best interest of the child, how we can be able to hold these fathers accountable.
As the inquiry continues then, what should the public be paying attention to the most in the coming weeks?
So what happens now is that the report has been tabled on the floor of the parliament. So the House should adopt this report, and once adopted, we should get to the phase of implementation of the recommendations of the report, which is what is supposed to offer reproof and the various mechanisms that the recommendations have proposed. Then these can be channels for redress, especially to the many accumulated grievances brought, over time due to the actions of the British Army. So the public should be keen on the implementation phase and following the adoption of the report by the House. And in 2026, I think the Defence Cooperation Agreement between Kenya and UK will be lapsing. So this report also offers room for further recommendations and amendments to the Defence Cooperation Agreement, which now should ensure a more sustainable training moving forward.
Kelvin, thank you so much for updating us on this matter, and we appreciate your time again.
Most welcome. Have a good day.
You too. Kelvin Kubai is Kenyan human rights lawyer, speaking to us about the ongoing parliamentary inquiry into allegations facing the British Army Training Unit, or Batuk, in Kenya. And one can only wonder whether, of course, this will reshape Kenya's relationship with Batuk going forward. But one wonders if we'll see a political will for real change through these inquiries, or we'll see lack of consequences. 7:30 Central African Time. Here's Onelin Sinzi with our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. President Donald Trump will host leaders of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, in Washington today to sign what is being called a historic peace and economic agreement. A Libyan war crime suspect who is accused of overseeing a notorious prison where inmates were routinely tortured and sometimes sexually abused has asked judges at the International Criminal Court to release him. And French President Emmanuel Macron is meeting his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing for talks which are expected to feature the war in Ukraine. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And it's time now to catch you up with what's been happening in the world of sport. And on top of that is Musibudi Rachel Makura. Good morning.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter Ndora. We'll start with this story. So FIFA has confirmed that star players heading to the Africa Cup of Nations tournament will be available to their clubs for an extra week before joining their national teams. So Mohamed Salah, Brian Mbemo, as well as Achraf Hakimi are among those who are now set to only be with their teams until the 13th of December. And by the 15th of December, they have to be with their national teams, easing, of course, cause concerns for Liverpool, Manchester United as well as Paris Saint-Germain. The 24-nation tournament runs in Morocco from the 21st of December, concluding on the 18th of January, while clubs said to lose key players for up to 5 weeks. Now, FIFA says the decision is to delay the release date came after consultations with stakeholders as well as CAF aimed at reducing the impact on clubs. We'll stay with the Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Angola head coach Patrice Bumel having named his final 28-man squad for the AFCON, confirming the group that will attempt now to deliver the country's best ever showing at the continental finals. Angola are in Group B against South Africa, Zimbabwe as well as Egypt, and despite expectations, seasoned figures including Bastos, Gilberto as well as Andrada have all not been included in the final squad. The French coach has opted now for a balanced group that blends experienced internationals with emerging talents, reinforcing his ambition to go beyond the quarterfinal stages for the very first time in the country's history. So Angola will rely heavily on the potency of Gilson Dala, Zito Luvombo, Mbala Nozolo, Mbululu as well as Randy Nteka as they aim now to break down some of the tournament's strongest defences. In midfield, influential figures such as Show Freddy, Maestro as well as Ben Mugendi will anchor the team, providing stability as well as creativity in equal measure. While in defence, Bumel has selected the likes of Clinton Mata, David Camo, Nurio Fortuna, Gaspir as well as Bautu to do the job in defence. Back home now, Abdelislam Wadu, the head coach of South African football side Orlando Pirates, says they are fully committed to serve the national team as the Buccaneers dominate the 25-man Bafana Bafana squad that is headed to the AFCON tournament. Now, Pirates boast the biggest representation with 9 players in Coach Hugo Bruce's side that is set to jet off for Morocco this month. The former Morocco national team captain says they are always happy to serve the national teams at all times.
First of all, we are proud as a club and proud as a coach for my players to be such represented in the national team. I told you before in some press conference that Orlando Pirates is a club that working for the nation. We are available for the national team. We are available for the coach of the national team for the collaboration. So, of course, when we see such number of players, we just want to wish them all the best.
On to some news now. South Africa completed the joint highest chase in the history of one-day internationals in India as they passed the target of 359. This to win by 4 wickets, and Naya Rapur. Now, Aiden Markram hit 110 from the top of the order, while Matthew Britsky as well as Devald Brevis both made half centuries as the Tourists beat India with 4 balls to spare. Virat Kohli as well Raturaj Gaikwad had both made centuries in the home side's innings, but having closed on 358 for 6, they were unable to defend their score as South Africa completed the joint 6th highest chase in the format's history to level the 3-match series at 1-1. The series concludes on Saturday before the 5-match T20 series is set to begin a few days later. And finally, the Los Angeles Clippers have released 12-time NBA All-Star Chris Paul following the side's dreadful start to the season. The Clippers have just lost 14 of their past 16 matches and announced Paul's departure just before their match against the Atlanta Hawks. Paul is 40 years of age and is regarded one of the best players in the NBA history and is competing in his 21st and final season in the league. Paul spent 6 seasons at the Clippers from 2011 to 2017 before rejoining the franchise on a 1-year deal in July. Paul is second on the NBA all-time list for assists with that 12,522 behind John Stockton's, who stands at 15,000 rather. That is 15,806 points. And that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Call us as well on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
7:37 Central Africa time, and coming up in a short while, I'm going to be talking to somebody from the Red Cross. Massive floods taking place in Asia at the moment, and we'll get an update on that. It's quite a bleak picture, and it's that time of the year, sadly, where weather patterns are quite severe, and on top of that, climate change also playing its part, and that's coming up.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
We say good morning now to Matapelo Mahape, who's on standby to give us the latest in the world of economics.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that South Africa's economy has stagnated under a burdensome regulatory regime driven by racial grievances and that it fell firmly outside of the group of the 20 largest industrialized economies. The U.S.'s top diplomat again attacked South Africa's government in an article published on online platforms, subtract titled "American Welcomes a New G20." He urged that the government's appetite for racism and tolerance for violence against its Afrikaner citizens had become embedded as core domestic policies, views that are not substantiated by facts. Sharon Bryce-Priest reported that Rubio reiterated President Donald Trump's position that South Africa would not be invited to participate in the G20 under the U.S. presidency, a position that has been rejected by Pretoria as outside Washington's purview.
Rubio laid into South Africa's government as seeming intent on enriching itself while the country's economy limped along, all while South Africans, according to Rubio, were subject to violence, discrimination and land confiscation without compensation. He attacked South Africa's G20 presidency for its focus on climate change, diversity and inclusion. He said the US supported the people of South Africa, but not what he labelled its radical ANC-led government, accusing it of scapegoating its own citizens and the United States. President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier indicated that despite numerous attempts to reset the relationship, the US continued to apply punitive measures against South Africa based on misinformation and distortions.
And questions have been raised about how a competitive electricity tariff could be funded for South African chrome producers and ferrochrome smelters. This as the industry players argue that the cost of power is the real cause of the sector's decline, not ore prices. In a joint statement, the Minerals Council South Africa and the Ferroalloy Producers Association have rejected the introduction of a chrome ore export tax. Chief Operating Officer at Teresa Michelle Tyler says engagements with the government are ongoing.
And in our view, it doesn't benefit them because their issue is not chrome feedstock or the price of chrome ore or the volume of chrome ore available to them. They've got more than sufficient. What makes them not competitive is electricity tariffs. We've seen electricity tariffs increase by some 900% since 2008. So when you then go to say impose a chrome tax, you've got to say, well, all right, well, who's going to consume that chrome tax? Who's going to absorb it and who's going to pay it?
And the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants Africa Members Convention opened in Mombasa, Kenya, with a strong calls for accountants to build tech-driven skills, enhance their public influence, and adapt to Africa's shifting economic landscape. These themes shaped the first day of deliberations, with the event running until tomorrow. ACCA Director for Africa, Jamil Ampoma, says accountants remain strong in technical reporting analysis.
I think from a professional accountancy perspective, the fundamental is to be able to be technically sound to do the work that we do. So from a reporting analysis, we believe that professional accountants are very strong. However, we also see that there's a lot of requirement for professionals to be technology savvy, being able to work with data comfortably, doing analytics. Also, we see a lot of developments with AI and other, if you like, initiatives in that regard.
And Nigeria's central bank has announced sweeping changes to its cash management policies, introducing stricter withdrawal limits and scrapping fees on excess deposits. This is in a bid to curb cash dependency and tackle security and money laundering risks. The central bank says the changes are effective from the 1st of January next year, and individuals will be limited to cumulative weekly withdrawals of almost $346 and corporates almost $3,458. Withdrawals above these thresholds will attract these or fees of 3% for individuals and 5% for corporates. This move marks the latest step in Nigeria's push towards a cashless economy. And oil prices increased today due to Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil infrastructure, which raised concerns about the supply constraints. Brent crude rose by $62.91, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate increased to $59.24. The attacks include a strike on the Druzhba pipeline, crucial for transporting oil to Hungary and Slovakia, although supplies continue to flow. Consultancy Kepler noted that Ukraine's drone strikes on the refining infrastructure have become more coordinated and targeted to prevent stabilization of key assets. And a look at your financial indicators. $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,445 naira. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 20. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39, and in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 93. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 31. Russia at 77 rubles 93. Kenya, it's 90 rupees 12, while in China, it's 71.6, and in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 6 cents. $1 is trading at 75 cents to the British pounds and 85 to the euro. A look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,196 and platinum at $1,656 pounds, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $62.93 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapela Mahape.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
French arms company Thales and South Africa's former president Jacob Zuma will tomorrow apply for leave to appeal the Pietermaritzburg High Court's dismissal of their application to be acquitted of all charges in the arms deal corruption case. 20 years after Zuma was first charged in 2005, evidence is yet to be led in the case. In 2020 and 2022, two senior Thales employees who figure prominently in the charges have passed away, prompting the application that Thales and Zuma's right to a fair trial is infringed. The state has filed an application for a court order that the trial must proceed despite any further applications and appeals. Dries Liebenberg reports.
Thales has argued that the evidence of Pierre Moynot and Alain Tetard, its directors in South Africa in the 90s and early 2000s, is crucial to answer the charges that former President Jacob Zuma was offered a 500,000 rand a year bribe. This was allegedly to ensure that he protects Thales in the investigation into irregularities around the 1999 arms deal. However, Judge Nkosinathi Cili ruled in June that the court doesn't have the power to stop a prosecution. That power lies with the National Prosecuting Authority. Judge Cili pointed out that society's interest in such a high-profile case should also be taken into account. He further said it's speculative at this stage to say that other witnesses, like for example Zuma's former financial advisor Shabir Sheikh, cannot assist the defense in their case. Meanwhile, the state has lodged an application for Judge Cili to order that the trial proceeds, despite any further appeals or applications by the defence. Lead prosecutor, Advocate Billy Downer, says in court papers that the prosecution of the case has been delayed for more than 18 years by legal challenges. Advocate Downer says during that period, Zuma made 2 presentations to the National Director of Public Prosecutions, entered a special plea, and lodged 7 pre-trial proceedings, all of which were unsuccessful. Advocate Downer says in papers Zuma's arguments have been dismissed in the initial applications, but he then pursued it on appeal as far as he possibly could. Once these appeals are exhausted, another point is raised and the exercise is repeated, according to Advocate Downer. Judge Trilly has set aside 2 days for arguments. I am Dries Liebenberg in Durban.
So we'll take a shift away from our African continent a little bit, moving to Asia. Floods being reported there in Southeast and South Asia, disrupting the lives of millions of Asians. We'll be finding out what's happening and which communities are hardest hit in just a bit. This is Rise and Shine.
Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like our Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
Severe and widespread flooding is sweeping across parts of Southeast and South Asia, disrupting the lives of millions from Indonesia and Malaysia to Sri Lanka and Vietnam. Entire communities have been displaced, critical infrastructure has been damaged, and humanitarian needs are rising sharply as the region grapples with days of relentless rain and devastating impact of Cyclone Ditwa in Sri Lanka. The International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies has moved quickly to scale up emergency support, providing evacuations, first aid, clean water, temporary shelter, and essential relief supplies. With us from Kuala Lumpur is Ho, who's the acting Deputy Regional Director of the IFRC's Asia Pacific Regional Office, to help us understand the situation on the ground and the scale of the response and what more is needed. Alice, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Alice, perhaps you can start by giving us a clearer picture of the flooding across Southeast and South Asia and the scale of the impact on communities that you're seeing.
Of course. So as you rightly mentioned earlier, that most part of Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, as well as Sri Lanka is heavily affected. So prolonged rainfalls, which have triggered flooding and landslide, is affecting more than millions of people, and still millions of people are still displaced. Some of the community are still being cut off. It's not only because this water is not receding yet, but also the infrastructure disrupted, road is cut off. Most of the communities are still struggling with very basic needs. What we are worrying right now is some of the weather forecasts indicated that there might be highly possibility more rainfall and thunderstorm in the coming days and weeks. So the further, the situation will definitely be further deteriorating.
Which countries or regions are currently facing the most severe conditions, and what distinguishes this year's flooding from previous seasons?
So right now, the International Federation of Red Cross Red Crescent Societies, we are prioritizing in Sri Lanka because in Sri Lanka, they are facing the worst flooding in decades. Millions of people are affected. Still thousands of people are still missing. And the Sri Lanka government, as well as the Red Cross in Sri Lanka, are requesting for international support. So that's why we are prioritizing Sri Lanka at this point of time. Having said that, our team on the ground in Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, in Indonesia, they're also activating to provide the response. What we currently see and witnessing is the prolonged rainfall and flooding. It's really setting a new normal. So for some area that we should not, or we did not see the usual flooding in the past, it actually flooded. So some area is actually hit twice as well. So this is the, very concern for us because this situation is very much unpredictable.
I suppose access to helping these people is making it really difficult.
Indeed. So one of our biggest challenges is still logistic. And in some remote area, they are still being isolated. As what I mentioned, somewhat is not receding yet, is still underwater. And some of the infrastructure disrupted, the road and bridges are either totally damaged or partially inaccessible. So we might not be able to reach those isolated communities, but we are trying everything we can to mobilizing our volunteer in the community and on the ground, trying to reach them and provide immediate needs.
So Sri Lanka worst hit. Are you concerned about Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, about further rainfall and perhaps secondary hazards?
Yes, we are concerning. So as I mentioned, weather forecast in some of the countries and area is really indicated further rainfall. And especially for some areas still being isolated, we are still conducting the immediate need assessment to really trying to find out the condition out there. So gratefully, we have our Red Cross volunteers on the ground. Hopefully, they will be able to reach the last mile and then giving us the most updated information so that we can react at once.
What are the most urgent needs right now, perhaps in terms of, I don't know, shelter, clean water, health services even?
So the most pressing need right now definitely is food, safe drinking water, emergency shelter with these materials, and medical care. We know that some of the medical facilities such as hospitals are damaged. So there's lack of medical care to the affected people. So one of the other thing that we're really focusing on is to prevent disease outbreak, because the flooding is in that scale can easily contaminate the water. So we're also prioritizing to prevent waterborne diseases at this moment.
I guess, I mean, these events are seasonal. We see this every year, perhaps because of climate change. They're getting a little bit more severe. Are these countries preparing themselves better, or are they just not able to keep up with the severity of these seasonal rains?
So the IFRC, together with our Red Cross Red Crescent Society, have already started a series of disaster preparedness and climate change adaptation activities on the ground. So some of the communities actually we have improved early warning system and some mitigations measure and adaptation activities, such as teaching people how to evacuate and teaching some of our volunteers how to respond and the first aid. So some of the situation is actually getting better in terms of response and saving lives. But indeed, these scales of disaster it's unpredictable. Is heavier than what we predicted. So the local resources, especially Sri Lanka, is overwhelmed. So that's why they will require international assistance and support at this point of time.
Yeah, I can imagine that this is a very difficult situation. And is there any way that the listeners, international community can assist?
Thank you so much for asking this. We are grateful that we have already received some international donor commitment and willingness to support our operations. Whatever is financially support or technical support is very much appreciated because solidarity is very much needed. As an individual, if you're in the affected countries or in other countries, sending some cheering votes message or warm message to those affected, especially to our responders, first responder and Red Cross volunteers is also very encouraging because our Red Cross volunteers of staff are working around the clock tirelessly to support those affected family. So this will be very helpful. When the relief is over, there is a long journey for early recovery. So we definitely need more sustained unrestricted funding to support the community to build back better, to rebuild their house, to restore their livelihood, to go back to the school for the kids, and to restore the medical facilities. On top of that, investing on disaster preparedness and readiness are also equally critical so that the community can increase their resilience in responding to the next disaster. And we really count on your support.
Alice, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and the work that you're doing. And we wish you strength and the best in helping the people in those affected countries.
Thank you.
That was Alice Ho, Acting Deputy Regional Director of the IFRC, Asia Pacific Regional Office, joining us from Kuala Lumpur as severe weather, rains affecting several countries in the region. And according to the IFRC, the floods have affected millions of people in the region, and it could be well over 3.3 million people. And as she says there, a lot of assistance is required. My name is Peter Ndoro, and coming up, we still have so much on the program.
My name is Asanda Beda. If you've just joined us, we now enter the third hour of the show. Let's get to the news. It's 8 o'clock Central African time. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The U.S. President Donald Trump will host leaders of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, in Washington today to sign what has been called a historic peace and economic agreement. Meanwhile, ahead of the meeting, clashes between the M23 rebel group and Congolese government forces supported by coalition troops broke out across South Kivu province, escalating tension in the eastern DRC. Independent social and political analyst Boikanyo Nkwatle explains.
This is not the first time that such a meeting has taken place. Perhaps this will be the second meeting. If you are not going to bring all stakeholders on board, it defeats the whole purpose of the whole facilitation talk. Because one of the bone of contention, I think, raised within the M23 is the fact that they've been excluded, they've been isolated from all these talks, and the DRC government itself has not honored some of the agreements that they had in terms of integrating some of their members into formal structures of the military. If you have not all the role players who are part and parcel of this whole conflict, then you only take a segment of them, I don't think it will have an impact.
Libyan war crimes suspect Khalid Mohammed Ali al-Hishri, who is accused of overseeing a notorious prison where inmates were routinely tortured and sometimes sexually abused, has asked judges at the International Criminal Court to release him. This was the first ICC appearance by Libyan suspects since the court began investigating atrocities committed during the country's civil war in 2011. The court has 9 outstanding arrest warrants for Libyan suspects. 47-year-old al-Hishri faces charges of crimes against humanity, including murder, torture and rape. He is the first Libyan suspect in the ICC custody. French arms company Thales will today apply for leave to appeal the Pietermaritzburg court in South Africa's dismissal of their application to be acquitted of the arms deal corruption charges against him. They are being charged together with the country's former president Jacob Zuma. The acquittal application was based on the death of two key Thales figures in the alleged bribing of Zuma in 2022 and 2020 respectively. Both Thales and Zuma have argued that the two deaths infringe on their rights to a fair trial. In his ruling in June, Judge Nkosinathi Chili said in such a high-profile case, society's interest should also be taken into account. The Africa Maibuya movement leader in South Africa, Flo Chivambu, has denied any leadership crisis in his party amid the resignation of 3 senior members. First Deputy President Robert Mwendo and 2 deputy secretaries have resigned from the party, sparking speculation of a leadership tussle. Chivambu was speaking to the media in the south of Johannesburg during a briefing on the party's preparedness to hold its inaugural national convention.
We do not have a crisis in the Africa Maibuya movement. We have had the resignation of the Deputy President, Robert Mwendo, who is also the president of MAUSA, the union that represents EPWP workers. He held a press conference to indicate that he resigned because he wants to focus on MAUSA. He couldn't perform both functions, and that is what he clarified and indicated that any other issue. And then the 2 deputy secretaries general that have resigned, they resigned because they were not available for organizational work.
Lastly, French President Emmanuel Macron is meeting his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing for talks which are expected to feature the war in Ukraine. Europe wants China to do more to end the conflict while Beijing maintains its neutral stance. The BBC's Steve MacDonald.
Before the main meeting, Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte were welcomed at the Great Hall of the People with an official honour guard. There were handshakes with Xi Jinping and his wife Peng Liyuan before a series of posed photographs. This state visit comes as other nations are hoping Beijing might be convinced to use its leverage with Moscow to pressure Vladimir Putin into ending his invasion of Ukraine, and the war has become a major focus of today's talks. However, none of the official language from the Chinese government has indicated a change in approach from Xi Jinping, whose administration has been accused of offering financial support and equipment for Russia's invasion.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Oneli Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, the Sawa CAF as well as Channel 4 agree historic deal that will see all 52 AFCON matches available on free-to-air in the UK, while the FIA elections will go ahead despite a legal challenge. I'll tell you more at 8:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the further corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Coming live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa, we are Rise and Shine. That's the name of our show on Channel Africa. And quite a number of stories to look at in this hour. Lesotho King Letsi III has commended Lesotho's excellent performance in bringing HIV from a pandemic state to being best performer in the management of the disease in the past 4 decades. Of course, we mustn't forget it's December. We still are within World AIDS Month and having celebrated World AIDS Day on the 1st of December. That's one of the stories we'll be looking at.
Yes, and also concerns being raised by Ghana's High Commissioner in South Africa about developments in the region, and we'll unpack what his thoughts are and what those issues in fact are. I'm Peter Ndor with Asanda Beda right here on Channel Africa Radio. Yay!
Jablan is a young man from Guyana in Limpopo in South Africa. A very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
Ghana's High Commissioner to South Africa, Ambassador Benjamin Kwashi, has warned that escalating conflicts across Africa from the Sahel to the Great Lakes region demand urgent continental action to uphold international humanitarian law and prevent further civilian suffering. Speaking to Channel Africa at the 24th Regional Seminar on International Humanitarian Law in Pretoria, Kwashi said the proliferation of coups, cross-border insurgencies and refugee flows underscores the need for African states to fully commit to the ICRC's Global High-Level Initiative.
I think it's so significant knowing very well that we have almost 50 plus active wars going on in Africa. It paints a very gloomy picture of the world we are going to live for the next generation. And I think the least we can do is to ensure that this IHL comes into full force. Because we've had instances of humanitarian aid workers, people being raped, people being denigrated, people going through all sort of, unhuman treatment during wars and conflict. I believe that what most of the speakers, especially the co-chairs, have indicated is that they just don't want us to look at just the humanitarian aspect. They want us to look at how we can prevent even the conflict in the first place. I think that this is a very, very critical point that we need to work with. This is a very critical initiative that every government in Africa will have to embrace because, look, wars transcend borders and, the rippling effect of a conflict in one region can get into another region, can get to another country, and then the challenges are very enormous. I come from West Africa, where you might be aware of the Sahel region and what is happening. Just 2 days ago, we woke up to another coup d'etat in Guinea. And I think that it is important that we push this agenda to ensure that we are able to respect human lives and treat people according to their humanities.
Indeed. And how affected are you with these conflicts from the Sahel? I know you might be having, carrying a chunk of refugees coming from that side?
Well, we do on the other side of the borders that we share with Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Mali, and all the others in the region. You should also be aware that President Mahama, for the first time, has constituted a body that is responsible for advising him on what is happening within the Sahel regions. It's a very, very renowned military man who is in charge of that. And the aim of the president, and he has clearly stated it without any ambiguity, that look, the rippling effect of what happens there, the refugees coming in, some of even the assailant coming into Ghana, some of even the rebels coming into Ghana. And these constitute a lot of grave challenges for our country. So in ensuring that he showed leadership, that is why he formed that special envoy to the Sahel regions. I can assure you that the rippling effects are there, but Ghana as a country is managing it and ensuring that we don't close our borders to the refugees. This is a matter of humanitarian concern, and I believe that it is something that Ghana doesn't take for granted.
And what are the discussions taking place within, that region with Nigeria? There's Cameroon there also, who is having issues. They just had elections very controversially. These are the issues that are fueling, things on the ground, but also the issue of resources. At the moment, we just hosted the G20, where the emphasis also is on beneficiation of the critical minerals that we have. We have abundance, of wealth. Why are we running around each other?
I think it is a very, very important point. And I love your President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech at the G20 closing ceremony. I think he spoke the mind of the current generation of Africa and also spoke the mind of the generation that is yet to follow us. Look, Africa should not be chasing other countries for help in doing things. Like you indicated, we have abundance of resources, we have abundance of minerals, we have abundance of agricultural produce. What we need among ourselves, it's strange that in having all these things, we've created borders among ourselves, which I believe the African Continental Free Trade Agreement area is going to work on. I would urge on all African countries to ratify the AFTA agreement so that we can all cooperate among each other for the betterment of our people. Look, anytime you bring in foreigners into our countries, I don't know whether you've heard about the stories of illegal mining in Ghana, where most of them were championed by Chinese and other nationalities. They come to fleet on our resources as a people, and we allow them to do it. They go develop their countries, and we continue to find ourselves in very deplorable conditions. I think that the time has come for pragmatic leadership. The time has come for our leaders to take the bull by the horn. I am so thrilled that in my country, President Mahama has said that diplomacy of yesterday, where you go cap in hand going to beg people, is over. We have what we call the economic diplomacy. I have something you want, you have something I want. Let's come together so that we don't find ourselves being bamboozled all the time by these foreign entities claiming to be the beginner. I love the way South Africa stood up to the challenges that nearly marred the beauty of the G20. I think that South Africa has sent a message clearly on behalf of the African people that those days are over. Those days of you bamboozling us is over. We know what we want. We know how we can get those things. We can develop among ourselves. And I'm sure that if we open ourselves and looking at the discussions that we've had here, it'll go a long way to give us the Africa we want by 2030. By 2030, 2036, we should be somewhere better.
So that was a Ghanaian ambassador to South Africa, Benjamin Kwashi, speaking to Channel Africa's Michael Mbewe.
And still in South Africa, a recent judgment in the country has put the legal fraternity on notice. Confirmatory affidavits can no longer be treated as administrative paperwork. In a recent case, the court dismissed one party's reliance on confirmatory affidavits because the witness provided nothing more than boilerplate template phrasing. Tutong Gabeni compiled this report with an explanation.
The judgment in the Blue Crane Root municipality in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa versus Storm and others has clarified that confirmatory affidavits must contain personal observations or factual detail to carry weight in court, as they cannot simply rubber stamp what is said in another affidavit. The court dismissed the reliance on confirmatory affidavits because they lacked substance, leaving them devoid of evidentiary value. This case serves as a cautionary tale for the importance of substantive first-hand evidence in supporting affidavits. Lavius Sidibani, associate in the dispute resolution practice at Cliff Decker Hofmeyer, says the ruling mandates deponents to present affidavits with evidence.
Affidavits in motion proceedings are as good as a smoking gun in criminal proceedings. The court in the recent judgment of Blue Crane Root municipality dismissed the applicant's reliance on confirmatory affidavit, which simply held that they were confirming the contents of replying affidavit insofar as it pertained to them. The truth is that these affidavits are not helping the court advance the matter any further than what the status would have been had these affidavits not been filed. Through this ruling, what this does is that it mandates now deponents going forward to present more evidentiary affidavits, which will assist the courts with factual accuracy of matters and events before a court can make a decision. Prior to this, courts were unable to make concrete decisions because they were presented with evidence that lacked substance. And there is now a need for substance whenever a deponent is preparing any form of affidavit. More particularly, if you are going to confirm the contents of another affidavit, you need to state what role you played and how the evidence, how far what you have witnessed as a witness will help the court go forward.
Furthermore, Sidibani says that the judgment now requires parties to have affidavits that have substance that will help the courts.
Affidavits in motion proceedings are as good as a smoking gun in criminal proceedings. Now, the court in the recent judgment of Blue Crane Root municipality dismissed the applicant's reliance on its confirmatory affidavits. And the reason for this dismissal is that the applicant had presented confirmatory affidavits which merely state that they confirm the contents of the replying affidavit insofar as it pertains to them. The truth of the matter is that these affidavits did not help the court advance the matter any further than what the status was before the affidavits were filed. Now, this ruling places now a procedural requirement on all deponents and legal practitioners that when you're filing an affidavit in court, you must firstly ensure that it has substance that will help the court advance the matter further, and secondly, it has factual accuracy so that the court will make the court's processes much easier for the court to reach a decision.
Sidibane says the court dismissed the reliance on the affidavits as these confirmatory affidavits did not help the court advance the matter any further than what the status would have been if the confirmatory affidavits had been found.
Affidavits in motion proceedings are like a gun in criminal proceedings. They carry the most important evidentiary role in a court of law. In the recent court judgment of Blue Crane Root Municipality, the court dismissed the applicant's reliance on its confirmatory affidavits, which confirmatory affidavits merely stated that they confirmed the contents of the replying affidavit insofar as it pertains to them. The truth of the matter is that these confirmatory affidavits did not help the court advance the matter any further than what it had or what the status would have been had the confirmatory affidavits not been filed. Now, this type of ruling has now changed the requirements procedurally. We are now required to file confirmatory affidavits which deal with substance and provide more of an evidentiary perspective of the true factual nature of circumstances as far as the witness who is giving a confirmatory affidavit was involved in these facts. Now, this is a requirement that has been placed not just on legal practitioners, but on all parties that are contemplating putting an affidavit before a court of law. They run the risk of them potentially being dismissed should they not provide sufficient evidence or carry sufficient weight that the court would require for it to reach the decisions or to reach a judgment based on facts that have been presented to it.
For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Beni in Johannesburg.
So that fascinating story about the law and affidavits, I found that a little bit interesting and fascinating. I think I could have been a lawyer in another life, Asanda. Is that something you might have done?
With this? Would you agree with the ruling?
I'm still trying to figure out what actually it all means, but I think it requires a lot of legal knowledge in terms of what it means and its implications. But
because it's very easy to get an affidavit. You go to a police station, the police officer doesn't really read even deeper into what you've written there.
Especially
and they put the stamp on the signature. And
you're off, you're gone. Yeah.
Maybe they'll double check your ID number, but that's about it.
Could you have been a lawyer?
No, absolutely not. I would have been a pharmacist if I was not here.
That's interesting. Do you know, when I was a kid, I actually grew up in Coventry, and one of my ambitions was just to be a policeman.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Kama ndi
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
A team of South African scientists using the South African Radio Observatory or SARAO Meerkat radio telescope has spotted a rare and extremely faint radio glow coming from a huge cluster of galaxies about 7 billion light years away. This type of glow, called an ultra-steep spectrum radio halo, is the most distant one ever found. The discovery, led by Isaac Magolego, a PhD student at the University of the Witwatersrand, supervised by Professors Roger Dean and Shitish Thorath from the University of the Witwatersrand and the University of Pretoria, respectively, has been accepted for publication in monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society letters. The student project is supported by the SARAO. For more on this, Magolego joins us now on the line to tell us more. Isaac, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you? And thank you for having me.
Thank you for making time for us. Tell us more about this PhD. In fact, we should be starting by saying congratulations on work well done. And then tell us about your PhD study and how long it took for you to conclude it.
So I am currently doing my final PhD in physics. I specialize with radio astronomy at the University of Witwatersrand. I am 2 years, 5 months in. So yeah, so the duration of a PhD is 3 years. The normal duration is 3 years. So I'm not yet, I haven't submitted yet, but we plan to submit before the end of December. And my project is based on the synergy between Meerkat and the South Pole Telescope, in which I'm looking or searching for diffuse cluster emission in radio clusters, in galaxy clusters. And that's what led to the discovery that I'm going to talk about today. So my project is strictly on diffuse cluster emission on galaxy clusters. I search for it through a systematic search throughout the Meerkat South Pole Telescope survey, which is a 100 square degree survey that we use.
Is this an everyday thing, the search for these halos? Tell us about that process. How often do you search as scientists in this particular field, and how often do you find what you're looking for?
Not always. So for us, we have a huge sample of galaxy clusters that were detected first by the South Pole Telescope. And what we do is we use Meerkat. Meerkat is a radio interferometer telescope which detect synchrotron emission. It's like diffuse radio glow. So most of the time, so it depends on the sensitivity of the telescope and how long the observation was to observe a particular target. So if your observation time was not long enough, you might not be able to make a detection. So in our case, we had a survey, and these galaxy clusters that I'm studying were observed blindly. So none of them were targets. So they were just along or embedded within the survey that we observed. So it's not every day that you get a detection. So it's very rare, especially for this discovery that we made, given the distance at which it is located. We were able to detect it in just 1 hour of observation, but blindly, it was not really the target. So yeah, it depends on the sensitivity of the telescope. Because I have a sample of them, a lot of them didn't host any radio glow, only a few, and the one that I am reporting today is the most prominent one, and it happened to be at the furthest distance ever detected.
So what does this discovery initially mean, and what will it add in terms of scientific research and advancement in this field? You say it's quite a prominent glow that you discovered, this type of glow called an ultra-steep spectrum radio halo. How significant is it?
So the detection is of high confidence, and first of all, for being observed in 1 hour, and blindly so, and we made this detection. This tells you a lot about the radio interferometry in terms of the Meerkat telescope is impressive. A lot of telescopes wouldn't make this detection, but in terms of the science, it pushes the boundaries of astrophysics. because the known ultra-deep spectrum radio halos that have been reported in literature before this one, they were all nearby, meaning at low redshifts. Their distances were not that far. So ours is so far that if we look the cosmic look back time, it is half the age of the universe. The universe is about 13.8 billion years. The age of this halo is about 7 billion years. So that tells us a lot about these kind of processes that makes these radio halos come to life. So these processes are normally they are not favored in the early universe or at high redshifts because in the early universe there are conditions that make this kind of glow almost impossible to detect. And the fact that we were able to detect it with meerkat is just impressive on sensitivity front. But scientifically, it tells us that the energy processes that are driven by turbulence. So turbulence is the one of the models that have been proposed for these kind of halos that they will be detected with the next generation of telescopes. This was like 2 decades ago, and we now have those sensitive telescopes we are able to detect. So that's one. But it tells us that in the physics or cosmology terms, it tells us that the energies that are responsible for mergers or for collisions that gives rise to the turbulence that give rise to radio halos, these processes were already happening in the earlier universe than expected, because all the ultra-deep spectrum radio halos that were reported in literature, all of them were nearby. So having this one at the high redshift tells us something about how the large-scale structures in the early universe formed and how they evolved as to how we see them today. So it contributes to the models of, or the theoretical models of formation of halos and how they evolve.
What's next for you then, Isaac, after this very interesting discovery?
So our next goal is to search or to find more of these rare halos, especially at high redshift. And to do so, we need to expand the survey and look for more of them. Because in this survey, it's a 100 square degree survey, we were able to find only 2. But here I recorded the one with the highest redshift, of course, because it's record breaking. We were only to find, we found 2, but we hope to find more if we expand the survey at least to more square degrees. So we're gonna try to find them, and then with the upcoming SKA, I'm not sure if you guys have heard about the Square Kilometer Array Observatory, which is currently in they're busy constructing more telescopes to add to the Meerkat. And oh no, the Meerkat will be added to the SKA observatory. So with that upcoming set of telescopes that will be more sensitive than what we have already, we will be able to search for these kind of sources across
Very
the universe,
fascinating.
and yes, and understand how common they were in the early universe. And then from that, we'll be able to draw some like conclusions. If we have a huge sample, we can make some very big conclusions, and how we can constrain the models that actually favor the formation of radio halos, because
Isaac,
there's a
thank you
lot
so
of
much for
models.
your time and for chatting to us on this very fascinating topic. Very interesting things you do there. Isaac Magolejo, a PhD student at the University of the Witwatersrand. Let's get our news headlines. Here's Onele Nzinzi, 8:31 Central African Time it is.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. President Donald Trump will host leaders of Rwanda and the DRC today in Washington to sign what has been called a historic peace and economic agreement. South Africa joined a majority of member states voting in favor of a draft resolution demanding the Russian Federation return all Ukrainian children forcibly transferred or deported during the ongoing conflict. And representatives of all 15 member states on the United Nations Security Council are visiting Syria today. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time to find out what's happening in the world of sports. And we say good morning once again to Musibudi Rachel Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. We'll start here. So the Confederation of African Football and Channel 4 in the United Kingdom have agreed a historic media rights agreement that will see the broadcaster become the home of the Total Energies CAF Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Now, Channel 4 has won the exclusive rights to broadcast the tournament, marking the first time the tournament will be available to watch for free in the UK. The tournament kicks off officially on the 21st of December and will see 24 teams contesting 52 matches across 9 stadiums. Now, the CAF General Secretary General, that is Vernon Mosenga Omba, described the agreement as historic in many ways, as it ensures that the AFCON tournament in Morocco will be live in each and every household in the UK for the very first time in the history of the competition. Now, the AFCON 2025 will feature the host of Premier League stars, including Liverpool winger Mohamed Salah, as well as Manchester City striker Omar Mamouche, representing Egypt, who are the tournament's most decorated side. Meanwhile, former South African defender Matthew Booth has applauded national team coach Hugo Broos's 25-man squad selection for the Africa Cup of Nations tournament, which he believes gives South Africa a genuine fighting chance at the title. Bafana will face Angola, Egypt, as well as Zimbabwe in Group B later this month, as they now look to build on the bronze medal they secured in the Ivory Coast last year. Booth shared his thoughts on Bruce's approach and why he believes the squad composition positions them very well at this year's tournament.
It's subjective, everybody's going to have their opinion. The one thing that struck me was at left back, Modiba, and then I realized that Gabini actually plays left back in Norway, but when he was here in the PSL for Tears, I only saw him as a centre back, so there's good cover. You can always, in the modern day football, you can always migrate one of your attacking wingers into a fullback role as well these days. And then a little bit sorry for Morena, but he hasn't played enough really out of the squad a couple of times, and only played 9 minutes against Popo on the bench recently in Algeria. Bruce has shown a bit of loyalty, for example with Moby for the longest time.
Although not against Bruce picking 3 experienced goalkeepers, Booth also added he would have loved to see a youngster take on one of those 3 specialised spots.
That was the other thing, although I would have loved to have seen a third choice goalkeeper being a youngster, maybe one of the under 20 goalkeepers, Fletcher Loaf. I mean, you don't want to take too many youngsters into a squad or a competition of this nature, but I think third choice goalkeeper, you can take a risk.
On to some rugby news now. The 2027 Rugby World Cup in Australia could see the Springboks of South Africa as well as the All Blacks of New Zealand as early as the quarterfinals. New Zealand have been drawn in Pool A alongside Australia, Chile as well as Hong Kong, with South Africa headlining Pool B with Italy, Georgia as well as Romania. So if both giants top their pools with wins in the round of 16, with the rounds of 16, they will then meet potentially in the last 8, with the winner likely to face France semi-finals and possibly England in the final. Meanwhile, the host side Australia are projected to meet England in the quarterfinals should the Wallabies finish second in Pool A. And finally, the FIA's presidential election is set to go ahead next week, although legal proceedings could overturn the result in February. A quirk in the election rules for the motorsports governing body means no other candidate is able to run against the incumbent Mohammed Ben Sulayem on the 12th of December. Now, Swiss racing driver Laura Velliers has expressed her intention to stand against Ben Sulayman and launched legal action against the FIA in October to challenge challenge its election process. Her lawyer sought an emergency judgment from a Paris court to suspend the election, but it will take place as scheduled in Uzbekistan, with Ben Sulayem said to be handed a second 4-year term. So while no decision was made by the court, a press release from Villiers said the judge held that the irregularities raised regarding the presidential election must be examined. It brings the time to 8:37 a.m. Central African Time. That concludes your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. More sporting updates with the On The Move team in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Today in history, the 4th of December 2014, a gunman targeted quarry workers near the Somalia border, escalating Kenya's security crisis and deepening concerns over cross-border terrorism as Al-Shabaab attack killed 36 workers in Mandera. In 1977 in South Africa, the apartheid government shut down The World, a newspaper publication edited by Percy Qoboza, following his courageous reporting on the Soweto uprising and police brutality. And in Tanganyika as it was known then, voted in its first general elections, and that was ahead of the independence from Britain. Julius Nyerere's TANU party won overwhelmingly, paving the way for independence a week later on the 9th of December 1961.
Day 7 of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. It is on this day. Let's be mindful. And of course, we're still within the month of December, which is World AIDS Month. And we'll be looking at a story later on the Tanzanian government, as you talk about that in your day in history. They're saying that they're recording improvements in their response to HIV/AIDS, as new data is showing that about 1.7 million people in the country are now living with the virus.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Mozambique's opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has been charged with incitement to terrorism and disobedience. He faces a total of 5 charges. The charges relate to post-election violence that left hundreds of people dead. What punishment is he looking at?
The most severe charges are 2. One is incitement for terrorism, and also is being charged for mobilizing people for terrorism during the protests. These charges are really serious and severe. If he is condemned, is found guilty, he could serve 10 years plus years in jail, meaning that he would be banned from political participation, mainly for the 2028 and 2029 electoral cycle.
The director of CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, Adriano Novunga.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Let's find out now what's happening in the world of business. We say good morning to Matapelo Mahape again.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says that South Africa's economy has stagnated under a burdensome regulatory regime driven by racial grievances, so that it fell firmly outside of the group of the 20 largest industrialized economies. The U.S. top diplomat again attacked South Africa's government in an article published on online platform Subtract titled "America Welcomes a New G20." He urged that government's appetite for racism and tolerance for violence against its Afrikaner citizens had become embedded as core domestic policies, views that are not substantiated by facts shown Bryce Peace reported that Rubio's reiterated President Donald Trump's position that South Africans would not be invited to participate in the G20 under the U.S. presidency, a position that has been rejected by Pretoria as outside Washington's purview.
Rubio laid into South Africa's government as seeming intent on enriching itself while the country's economy limped along, all while South Africans, according to Rubio, were subject to violence, discrimination and land confiscation without compensation. He attacked South Africa's G20 presidency for its focus on climate change, diversity and inclusion. He said the US supported the people of South Africa, but not what he labelled its radical ANC-led government, accusing it of scapegoating its own citizens and the United States. President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier indicated that despite numerous attempts to reset the relationship, the US continued to apply punitive measures against South Africa based on misinformation and distortions.
And the African Union's inaugural conference on digital agriculture has wrapped up in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The conference was looking at ways to harness advanced technology to spur agricultural transformation and build resilient and sustainable food systems across Africa. Addressing the conference, the Commissioner for Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, Moses Vilakati, reaffirmed his commitment to digital transformation as a cornerstone for agricultural modernization, food security and sustainable growth.
Farmers will now gain access to real-time information on markets, on financing, on prices, as well as the weather forecast. And you can only do that through digital transformation because they are able, therefore, to tap into digital apps for the benefit of that particular information. Imagine if there was no digital transformation. Farmers would not know whether to plow or plant that particular year. But now, through that weather forecasting, they're able to say, I will be able to go to the field.
And the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants Africa Members Convention opened in Mombasa, Kenya, with strong calls for accountants to build tech-driven skills, enhance their public influence and adapt to Africa's shifting economic landscape. These themes shaped up the first day of deliberations with the event running until tomorrow. ACCA Director for Africa, Jamil Ampoma, says accountants remain stronger in technical reporting analysis.
I think from a professional accountancy perspective, the fundamental is to be able to be technically sound to do the work that we do. So from a reporting analysis, we believe that professional accountants are very strong. However, we also see that there's a lot of requirement for professionals to be technology savvy, being able to work with data comfortably, doing analytics. Also, we see a lot of developments with AI and other, if you like, initiatives in that regard.
And South Africa's coal exports in 2025 were forecasted to be slightly lower than or closer to the previous year's figures. Despite some operational improvements at the state-owned logistics company Transnet, projections by key miners indicated that systematic rail infrastructure challenges continue to cap export potential. Mining analyst at Modern Corporate Solutions, Peter Major.
Let's look at some of the reasons we weren't able to export as much as we wanted to this year. That we're only going to tie last year, and last year was a bad year historically. First of all, coal prices have dropped more than 25% from what we were getting last year. The rand has strengthened about 15%. On the demand side, China is huge. If China starts importing coal, their actual demand for imports would be 100 to 200 million tons, just clicking your fingers. But they can turn that off in a nanosecond.
And oil prices increased today due to Ukrainian attacks on Russian oil infrastructure, which raised concerns about supply constraints. Brent crude rose to $62.91, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate increased to $59.24. The attacks include a strike on the Druzhba pipeline, crucial for transporting oil to Hungary and Slovakia. Although supplies continue to flow, consultancy Kepler noted that Ukraine's drones strikes on a refining or infrastructure have become more coordinated and targeted to prevent the stabilization of key assets. And a look at your financial indicators. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,445 naira. In Botswana, it's 13.20. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 93. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 31. Russia at 77 rubles 93. India, it's 90 rupees 12. While in China, it's 71.5. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rands 6 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 85 to the euro. A look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,193 and platinum at $1,650 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $62.95 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapela Mahape.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
King Lesia III has commended Lesotho's excellent performance in bringing HIV from a pandemic state to being the best performer in the management of the disease in the past 4 decades. This year's commemoration is marked under the theme Overcoming Disruptions, Transforming the AIDS Response. And this takes place under challenging financial times where most of the United States' funding has been drastically withdrawn. Rapelang Khadebe is our correspondent in Lesotho.
For the past 40 years, the Kingdom of Lesotho has been battling with HIV and AIDS, and throughout, the royal family has led from the front in finding a working solution for the most vulnerable. The development partners and other stakeholders have come forward to offer their assistance in fighting the scourge.
Welcome to Partners in Health store. Here we have one of our machinery, which is the spirosphere. Inside it has some machinery which is used to assess the lung damage that is often associated with HIV complications.
And in commemoration of the AIDS Day, each year the King, his cabinet and stakeholders signs commitment to ensure that despite disruptions, the gains made are not lost.
Excellencies, I am proud to report that Lesotho has made significant strides in recent years. As you have heard over and over again today, we have achieved and even surpassed the 95 targets set by UNAIDS for 2025. This remarkable achievement is a testament to the power of concerted effort and unity. These successes must be fiercely guarded with no room for complacency. We must work together to sustain these gains and continue saving lives.
And for the first time, Lesotho will be among the first to offer a new long-acting HIV drug, lenacapavir, which can be administered via injection only twice a year.
This new drug offers a long-acting, highly effective means of protection that aligns with the evolving needs of our communities, particularly for those for whom traditional prevention methods have proven challenging.
For long, the United States of America has been a funding anchor to Lesotho's healthcare services, but with recent funding withdrawals, the U.S. is applying cautious approach to not derail all gains made.
We are working to conclude an agreement that will be a testament to our shared vision of a self-reliant, resilient, and sustainable health system. And we plan to sign this agreement very soon. For nearly 2 decades, the United States has stood with Lesotho in the fight against HIV/AIDS. PEPFAR and other U.S. initiatives have helped save hundreds of thousands of lives in Lesotho and helped Lesotho surpass global pandemic control targets, making Lesotho one of the only few countries that have achieved this mark.
And in the midst of dwindling funding crisis, some organizations remain steadfast to serve.
We have young patients who joined us at the very beginning who were very sick, young and struggling with, taking their medications and not sure what the future would hold for them. And many of them now have grown up, have great careers. Some of them are working with our staff, and it's been really exciting. We've also managed to continue to support the government of Lesotho with expanding and decentralizing care for children and families living with HIV, TB-related conditions.
Lesotho has recommitted to a transformed response by embracing innovation, fostering inclusivity, and working diligently towards change which will ultimately overcome disruptions, but also build towards an AIDS-free Lesotho as per the 2030 set target goals. I'm Rapelang Khatebe, Masego, Lesotho.
Siyabangena manje. Vito iJabulani Nkolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbulekeni.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
Coming up after Rise and Shine is On the Move, and that's hosted by Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tau. Palesa joining us now to tell us what we can expect. It's the 4th of December.
It is. Good morning.
It's a Thursday. How are you feeling about pre-Friday vibes?
Oh, it's always good. Pre-Friday is always good. The closer to Friday, the better. All right, today we're going to be speaking about families, and you know those families where everybody, each one of the children, the parents has like a poster of their graduation on the wall, and anything that's outside of that particular achievement is not seen as an achievement in that family. So meaning that from the time the children are young, it's almost like a pressure cooker family where you are told these are the degrees we do in this house, this is what we do, and everybody must be on the wall post-grad right? So we're going to be speaking about that, but also exploring what it looks like to build a family culture that goes beyond achievement. So maybe seeing things like cultural curiosity as achievements in those families, creativity, and other ways that, we can define achievement in our families.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, your older brother's a doctor, another's an accountant, and
the other one is a lawyer.
And then you want to be a dancer. And your parents will say, get a serious job. Please. And you can dance on the side.
You want to be what? A radio host? I'm sorry. That's not in this family, honey.
I had a hard conversation with my dad when I told him I'm giving up accounting to become a radio person. And I said, what?
It's tough times, though, that if we're still holding on to that, man. Now, you need a creative in the family.
Absolutely.
It's necessary.
So that's On the Move after the 9 o'clock news.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The Tanzanian government says it is recording improvements in its response to HIV/AIDS, as new data shows that about 1.7 million people in the country are now living with the virus. Authorities say they have strengthened HIV/AIDS services nationwide, expanding the number of facilities offering treatment and ensuring free access to ARVs, even though as global funding for HIV programs continues to decline. Isaac Lukando filed this report.
The Tanzanian government says that while progress is gradual, it is steadily pushing back against the spread of HIV/AIDS. Data indicates that the number of people living with HIV in Tanzania has remained relatively stable at around 1.7 million from 2019 to now. HIV prevalence among adults stands at around 4.4% on the mainland and 0.4% in Zanzibar, significantly lower than in several southern African countries. New annual infections have also fallen, dropping from roughly 72,000 in 2018 to about 60,000 today. Officials say their efforts are working, particularly with the expansion of free treatment centers. The number of facilities providing care for people living with HIV/AIDS increased by 398 within a year, roughly 5.1% in terms of a rise. They add that the near universal uptake of treatment services shows growing public willingness to test regularly and a stronger general awareness of HIV/AIDS. But sustaining momentum remains a challenge. UNAIDS notes that many African countries struggle with limited resources, with domestic revenue collections averaging around 16% of GDP, well before the global average, making self-financing the HIV response difficult. A similar concern is raised by the European Union's Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, which projects a 30 to 40% decline in external health funding in 2025 compared to 2023. However, there are new developments offering some hope. A recent $150 million US commitment to Zipline will help the drone delivery service to support the distribution of medicines and vaccines to hard-to-reach areas across about 5 African countries. The move is seen as the first major shift in unfreezing foreign assistance by the US government and perhaps a crucial lifeline in the fight against HIV/AIDS. Isaac Lukando, Dar es Salaam.
Just a reminder that Channel Africa hosts our Channel Africa podcast that happens on Thursdays. You can tune in on www.co.za for that. Also on the SABC Plus app. Always interesting conversations happening there each week on Thursdays on Channel Africa from the African perspective.
Yes, indeed. And we've been having some fascinating conversations recently.
Yeah, actually, you should have a reflection of the whole year. It's December now.
I've got to tell you, Tanzania is sharply in focus at the moment because next week is Independence Day, and the Tanzanian youth and people in general have vowed to go back onto the streets against Samia Suluhu Hassan. And so we are fearful of what might happen because we saw reports of upwards above 3,000 people killed on October the 29th, following the election in Tanzania. So if this demonstration does happen on December the 9th next week, we don't know what might happen. But she's already starting to feel the pushback from the international community. The European Union has suspended aid coming into Tanzania. And she came out yesterday saying that we don't care about this paltry aid that you give us. You cannot dictate to us as an independent sovereign state how we must do things. So on the one hand, she's trying to be firm and strong, but there certainly have been consequences to her usurping power because
also Kenya was another interesting one that you touched on a lot this year on the podcasts. But anyway, that's on Thursdays on Channel Africa. We say goodbye as the Rise and Shine team. My name is Asanda Beda.
And I'm Peter Ndora saying please have an awesome day ahead and join us again tomorrow morning bright and early, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central African time each weekday. And please tell a friend to join us. www.channelafrica.co.za.
Yes, your news with Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories, the U.S. to host Rwanda and the DRC for peace talks in Washington, and 15 member states on the United Nations Security Council visiting Syria. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. The U.S. President Donald Trump will host leaders of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, in Washington today to sign what has been called a historic peace and economic agreement. Meanwhile, ahead of the meeting, clashes between the M23 rebel group and Congolese government forces, supported by coalition troops, broke out across South Kivu province, escalating tension in the eastern DRC. Independent social and political analyst Boikanyo Nkwantle explains.
This is not the first time that such a meeting has taken place. Perhaps this will be the second meeting. If we are not going to bring all stakeholders on board, it defeats the whole purpose of the whole facilitation talk. Because one of the bone of contention, I think, raised within the M23 is the fact that they've been excluded, they've been isolated from all these talks, and the DRC government itself has not honored some of the agreements that they had in terms of integrating some of their members into formal structures of the military. If you have not all the role players who are part and parcel of this whole conflict, then you only take a certain